What happens when an elite imperial auditor gets undercover duty to shut down the most useless department in history? Let's just say these lazy slackers have no idea their cozy jobs are about to go up in flames. Looking at this grand crest, you'd think this place actually mattered, but they're just chattering away about ancient scrolls. Our undercover glasses-wearing hero, who's actually a top-tier investigator, gets led into the hall by the chubby, cheerful minister of the scroll management department. The old man is happily hyping up his team, completely unaware he's walking with his own executioner. Our hero plays along with a polite, fake smirk, pretending to be a wide-eyed newbie. Seriously, look at that pristine customer service smile. It's almost too perfect to be trusted. But the moment the minister's back is turned, the glasses come up with a pixelated middle finger. What absolute nonsense, he thinks, counting down the exact 407 days of pure slacking in this useless division. The chubby minister just giggles and laughs, completely clueless about his intern's true identity or how long it's actually been since their last hire. Honestly, this guy's leadership skills are absolute peak comedy. Dropping the friendly act, our hero glares coldly into the void. This department is a complete waste of imperial tax money, and he's determined to prove it has absolutely no reason to exist. To understand why, we have to look at the Empire of Plari-Wuda, gorgeous, peaceful realm literally blessed by a golden dragon. It's basically a fantasy paradise where everything is supposed to run like clockwork. Here, countless specialized departments are established to maintain the peace and order of the realm, keeping Plari-Wood safe and prosperous. From finance and medicine to education, elite civil servants run the show, but the scroll management department is a weird hybrid division connected to both the Magic Tower and the Royal Knights. Scrolls are basically cheat codes for everyday life, allowing even magic-impaired citizens to clean their rooms with floating brooms or summon bursts of fire with a simple swipe. But Crown Prince Kiros doesn't rely on magic at all, and he highly doubts this lazy scroll department is even necessary anymore. Look at that shadowy royal aesthetic. He's clearly not playing around. So the prince devised a ruthless plan to clean house and cut the budget. You just know a villainous grin like that means trouble is brewing for our slacker civil servants. The plan? Send in a secret auditor to infiltrate the scroll department, gather dirt on how useless they are, and shut it down once and for all. Back in his office, our glasses-wearing protagonist prepares for his mission. His sole objective is to judge whether this department gets to exist or gets deleted from the empire. Honestly, he thinks this is going to be the easiest job of his life. One look at his targets, and he's already counting his victory. And he's not wrong. This department is literally a dump for people who got the absolute lowest scores on the civil service exam. Just look at this chibi sleeping on the job. It is a masterclass in slacking. While one guy yawns and scratches his belly, others are giggling and gossiping in the back. This isn't an office. It's a cozy daycare. To make matters worse, look at what they are actually doing with their high-grade magical scrolls. They are literally playing Jenga with them. Team leader Osan is being cheered on like a hero just for stacking office supplies. This is where your tax dollars are going, folks. Our protagonist is deadpan, pushing his glasses up in utter disbelief. Playing Jenga with government property is definitely crossing the line, especially for a team leader. He watches the ridiculous spectacle, mentally deducting points as he laments the absolute waste of the Empire's budget. Suddenly, a soft voice interrupts his silent judging, asking if he completed his assigned task. It's Namiya, a stunning silver-haired girl with eyes like sparkling sapphires, carrying a stack of documents. She apologizes for keeping him waiting due to some processing delays. But the moment she looks at the boxes of scrolls, her jaw drops. They are completely untouched, and our hero has the ultimate "what have you been doing this whole time" look on his face. Our hero quickly flashes a sheepish smile, explaining he couldn't open them because nobody bothered to give him viewing permissions, a basic right he should have gotten on day one. Namiya looks puzzled, wondering why the minister didn't process the basic paperwork. Meanwhile, our investigator watches closely to see how she'll handle this bureaucratic mess. Instead of panicking, she just lets out a tired sigh, making a totally dismissive "so what" face. Talk about zero customer service. Process is a mess. Minus 10 points. Our tiny chibi hero screams internally, furiously docking points on his mental notepad. This department is speedrunning its own destruction. Namiya taps her chin thoughtfully, wondering if there's any spare parchment left to bypass the formal system. As she sits down to write, our hero observes her, recalling that Namiya Loapi is the second daughter of a barony. He recalls rumors that her older sister was a certified genius, making him highly skeptical of Namia's abilities. Is she even writing the magic circles correctly? But his skeptical thoughts are instantly shattered as a sudden warm light begins to emanate from her desk. Brilliant golden magic bursts from her hands, illuminating the entire room with dazzling flower petals. She's literally casting high-level magic effortlessly. The golden aura sparkles around our stunned hero as she casually tells him he should now be able to view the scrolls freely. He stares at his hands, completely baffled. Is this really how it's done? Nothing feels different, he mutters, but Namiya confidently tells him to go ahead and try. He tries and the realization hits him like a truck. His eyes widen in absolute shock as he realizes her magic worked instantly. Completely losing his cool, he stammers about this being his first time seeing such high-level magic up close. Namiya just stares at him like he's a total weirdo. She wonders how someone who has never seen magic even became a civil servant. Is it nepotism? She asks bluntly, making him sweat bullets. Before he can recover, she leans in, asking if he's already trying to boss around a senior. Right on cue, team leader Osan swagger walks into the room, looking incredibly smug and full of himself. Osan starts teasing them, asking if they are slacking off just because a pretty boy joined, or if they're secretly dating. Wow, Osan is really hitting the slacker boss bingo here. Our hero looks over at Namiya, noticing her eyes are completely vacant. He can't tell if she's unfazed or just completely checked out. Up close, her sapphire eyes are absolutely breathtaking, sparkling with a mysterious, deep light that leaves him speechless. Clearing his throat to break the awkward silence, our hero tries to steer the conversation back to professional matters. He asks Osan if he actually needed something, prompting the team leader to finally remember his actual work business. Osan asks how many defense scrolls they have left, and Namiya instantly questions why he suddenly needs them. Osan explains that tomorrow is Countess Torres's funeral, and the incredibly powerful Crown Prince himself will be in attendance. Osan chuckles, bragging that while the prince is insanely strong, they still need to prepare some defense scrolls just in case anything crazy happens. But Namiya looks deeply concerned, pointing out that only 6 defense scrolls have clear limits, and if something goes wrong, their department is toast. Irritated by her negativity, Osan snaps back, asking what her major problem is today. Oh boy, the tension is finally building. Osan sneers, crossing his arms arrogantly while throwing a massive tantrum about how his authority is absolute. He snaps that since he and the minister already agreed on the plan, a junior staff member has absolutely no right to voice an opinion. Osan leans in, his face contorting with sheer malice as he points a glowing finger directly at her face to assert dominance. He barks that low-level employees exist solely to shut up, follow orders, and say yes, sir, without questioning their betters. Namiya keeps her head bowed, but her hands are trembling as she tightly grips the fabric of her skirt, holding back a tidal wave of frustration. Dealing with toxic middle management is honestly the ultimate test of survival in any corporate fantasy world. As the tense silence stretches on, the office clock ticks steadily forward, displaying that it is already 15 minutes to closing time. Our undercover auditor Kibben looks around the desolate room, realizing the entire slacker squad cleared out the moment the clock began winding down. Talk about peak work-life balance. The second the clock strikes near 5, these guys vanish like actual ghosts. Kibben glances sideways, wondering why on earth this quiet noblewoman is still sitting at her desk instead of rushing out the door like everyone else. Namiya stares vacantly into space with a totally glazed look, completely motionless as if her soul left her body after that brutal scolding. Kibben watches her closely, wondering if the team leader's harsh words actually broke her spirit. Shaking his head, Kibben decides it is a complete waste of time to worry about a coworker's emotional drama when his main goal is to dismantle the entire division anyway. Why play the nice guy when you are literally the executioner sent to fire them all? Before he can make his clean getaway, Namiya suddenly speaks up, politely asking him to bring her 2 boxes of scroll parchment and ink. Kibben's eyebrow twitches in sheer annoyance, screaming internally about getting hit with extra chores right before clocking out. She calmly explains that she is running out of time and needs the supplies brought from the storage closet immediately. The nerve of this girl, treating an undercover elite inspector like her personal errand boy? Kibben scoffs to himself, reasoning that if she is truly in such a desperate rush, she should get off her chair and fetch the heavy boxes herself. Flashing a professional, passive-aggressive office smile, he politely declines, stating he is also about to head home for the evening. He waves a casual goodbye, dropping the bomb that he won't even be coming to the office tomorrow. He assumes she'll just offer another empty, vacant nod like she always does with those hazy blue eyes. But as he turns to leave, a firm grip suddenly clamps down on his sleeve, stopping him dead in his tracks. Namiya looks down, her grip tightening on his arm as she commands him to wait. Kiban freezes, completely caught off guard by this unexpected physical defiance. She stands in complete silence for a tense moment, her face partially shadowed as she gathers her thoughts. Pointing toward the wall clock, she notes that under Article 4 of the Imperial Civil Service Act, official working hours run strictly from 9 in the morning until 6 in the evening. Since it is currently only 5:50, she still has 10 minutes of authority over him. Leaning in with an intense gaze, she asserts that he is legally obligated to obey her request as his senior colleague. Kiban's jaw literally drops as she uses the bureaucratic rulebook against him. This girl just pulled the ultimate by-the-book card on an actual elite auditor. Kibon stands frozen, a cold sweat running down his neck as he stares at her, completely flabbergasted by her sudden surge of fierce authority. His eye widens behind his glasses, utterly mesmerized and unsettled by the sheer determination burning in her eyes. Bathed in a soft, ethereal light filled with blooming blue flowers, Namiya asks him if he understands her instructions. Kibon is completely left speechless, desperately wondering who this mysterious woman really is. Later that night, Kibon stands alone in his dark office, staring out the massive window at the starry night sky. Adjusting his glasses with a slow, devious grin, he murmurs how incredibly intriguing she has turned out to be. Mischievously, it looks like his boring undercover assignment just got a major upgrade in the entertainment department. Back in the department, Namiya is seen struggling to carry an absurdly massive pile of heavy scrolls, determined to complete her secret task. Kibon adjusts his collar under a brilliant, glowing golden aura, wondering what she could possibly be planning to do with such a ridiculous quantity of magical scrolls. He ponders whether her desperate actions will ultimately prove the scroll management department's worth, or if it'll all end in utter failure. Crown Prince Kiaros narrows his bright red eyes, silently declaring that they will all find out the ultimate truth tomorrow morning. Meanwhile, deep in the dead of night, the scroll management department building stands quietly under the crescent moon, its windows glowing with faint candlelight. Inside, Namiya is furiously riding magic circles when a drop of blood suddenly drips from her nose. She is pushing her body past its absolute limits to finish this critical work. Sweating profusely, she quickly wipes the nosebleed away, refusing to let physical exhaustion slow down her progress. The stakes must be insanely high if she's willing to work herself to death like this. Staring at the giant wooden box labeled Things to Do, overflowing with dozens of scrolls, she reminds herself that she absolutely cannot falter tonight. We learn that the royal family are actually Dragonians, powerful dragonkin who inherit the legendary blood of ancient dragons. Once they reach the age of 25, they can fully manifest their dragon forms and unleash unique, top-secret special abilities, with Crown Prince Kiaros possessing the most terrifying power of them all. Namiya bites her lip, recalling from her memories that these special dragon abilities are kept strictly secret from the general public, leaving her in the dark about his exact powers. But the most critical detail is that despite his overwhelming strength, the Crown Prince is destined to be brutally ambushed and assassinated during tomorrow's public procession. She shakes her head to clear her thoughts, deciding to postpone analyzing the complex lore from the original book since her immediate priority is surviving this brutal workload. If she fails to save him, his tragic death will trigger a devastating 30-year-long war that will engulf the entire empire in flames and slaughter millions of innocent citizens. Screams! Talk about a massive butterfly effect starting from a single lazy scroll department. Determined to rewrite this tragic future, Namiya ties her silver hair back with absolute resolve, knowing she must save the Crown Prince tomorrow to find the one person she desperately needs. With her eyes literally glowing like fiery coals, she plunges back into her work, determined to pull off a miracle using a unique magic method only she can perform. The next morning arrives, and Namiya is seen wheeling an enormous heavy wooden cart stacked high with completed defense scrolls right into the royal courtyard. She looks completely dead on her feet, blinking slowly with dark circles under her eyes after pulling a brutal, soul-crushing all-nighter. The Imperial Guards whisper and point at her, mocking the useless scroll management department, completely oblivious to the fact that this single exhausted girl just saved their entire future. Looking over, she spots Kibon striking an outrageously fabulous anime pose with sparkles flying everywhere. Honestly, Kibon's dramatic sparkling poses are pure comedy gold. This guy treats every office entrance like a fashion runway. She freezes in place, her sapphire eye widening in absolute awe as she catches her very first glimpse of the legendary Crown Prince approaching. Clad in regal dark armor and a sweeping crimson cape, Crown Prince Kiaros Polarwood strides forward, radiating an aura of absolute majesty and dangerous power. Time seems to stand completely still as the powerful prince suddenly stops, locking his piercing crimson gaze directly onto Namia's face. A royal guard quickly steps forward, asking if something is wrong, but Kiro simply dismisses it, turning away with a cold, calm expression. But as he walks away, Kiros flashes a jaw-dropping, incredibly handsome smirk over his shoulder, clearly intrigued by the silver-haired girl with the giant cart. Namia tilts her head in confusion, wondering if the prince was actually staring directly at her, just as the commander yells for the royal knights to assemble. With the horses snorting and the procession finally underway, the stage is officially set for the most critical life-or-death battle of the empire. Sitting regally in his carriage, Crown Prince Kiaros crosses his arms with an incredibly stern look on his face, calling out to his soldiers. He has no time for games today, and his sharp red eyes burn with absolute focus. Out on the field, the knight captain lets out a booming shout to rally the troops. He proudly declares that they are the legendary White Knights, an elite force sworn to serve and protect the crown prince himself. Sweating profusely from the pressure, the captain dramatically points ahead, demanding that they protect His Highness from any and all incoming danger. Meanwhile, his junior knights are standing there looking completely depressed, with one of them slowly raising a hand to speak up. The junior knight nervously reminds the captain that the crown prince can literally take down 15 elite knights with a single hand. Pointing to a flashback of their humiliating training defeat, he genuinely wonders why they even need to protect a monster of a boss. He goes on to list the prince's absurd feats, noting how Kiros can shatter giant boulders with a single aura blast and run 100 laps around the training field without even breaking a sweat. The poor captain is left shaking in absolute embarrassment. The knights sigh in complete defeat, wondering if their entire existence is just completely useless. Suddenly, the captain bursts into dramatic, streaming anime tears, screaming that he's the one who has to face the terrifying prince face-to-face for daily reports. Sobbing uncontrollably on his horse, the captain mimics the prince's signature patronizing look of pity that completely crushes his soul every single day. Honestly, the emotional damage these poor knights suffer is far more dangerous than any assassin. Watching this chaotic drama unfold from a distance, Namia just stares with her classic blank, deadpan expression. She quietly thinks to herself that the military department must have it incredibly rough dealing with such a dramatic boss. Suddenly, Kiros himself leans over the carriage railing, dryly apologizing if his overwhelming existence is causing them so much emotional trauma. The captain freezes in sheer terror, instantly bowing his head in panic as the procession is ordered to begin. The grand royal procession officially kicks off, and the streets are absolutely packed with cheering citizens throwing flower petals. The crowd screams their praises, wishing eternal prosperity to the glorious crown prince. Bathed in brilliant golden sunlight, Kiros waves to the massive crowd with a flawless, polite public smile. He looks like the picture-perfect image of a benevolent, heroic ruler, hiding his inner exhaustion perfectly from his adoring subjects. But the moment the carriage blinds are drawn, the prince collapses onto the velvet cushions, holding his head in pure exhaustion. He sighs heavily, admitting to himself that pushing his limits over the past few days has completely drained his battery. As he rests his head, Kiros' mind wanders back to the bizarre behavior of the quiet noblewoman from the scroll management department. He can't shake the feeling that her intense stare from yesterday was trying to warn him about something. He vividly recalls the conversation she had with Kiban, where she desperately argued that a mere 6 defense scrolls would be completely insufficient if a major incident occurred. Wait, did she actually predict an upcoming disaster? This is getting highly suspicious. Kiro scoffs at the thought, reassuring himself that a powerful dragonkin like him could never be put in actual danger. But down in the crowded streets, a mysterious hooded figure slowly draws a glowing poison-tipped dagger. Swoosh! In a flash, the assassin lunges forward to strike. Spotting the sudden danger, the red-haired knight captain acts on pure instinct, leaping onto the carriage with his sword drawn to deflect the lethal strike. Kiros' eyes widen in sheer disbelief as he realizes his body didn't react in time. Sweat runs down his face as he faces the terrifying truth. He actually noticed the attack later than his own knight captain. The captain desperately yells for the prince to escape the carriage immediately. Adrenaline surging, Kiaros leaps out of the golden carriage just as a dark magic spell completely obliterates the royal vehicle. Landing on the stone pavement, Kiros tries to summon his power, but a sudden wave of panic washes over him. His heart is literally bound by invisible heavy chains of dark mana, completely locking away his aura and abilities. Realizing he can't access a single drop of magic, he recognizes this terrifying phenomenon as the Dark Period, a rare state of total powerlessness. But this is impossible since Dragonians are only supposed to experience this once in a lifetime. Before he can even process his panic, a massive rain of lethal iron arrows suddenly arches across the sky, heading directly for his defenseless position. Paralyzed on his knees, Kairos can only watch his impending doom. He grunts in frustration, bracing for the impact of 100 arrows. This is the exact tragic moment from the original book where the Crown Prince is supposed to die, setting off 3 decades of absolute chaos. But just as all hope seems lost, Namia's voice suddenly cuts through the chaos with absolute authority. Sweating from the immense strain, she commands the hidden defense scrolls to activate at once. Boom! A magnificent, blinding golden dome of pure magical energy erupts around Kairos, completely deflecting the deadly storm of arrows like they're nothing but tiny pebbles. Kairos looks up in complete awe, completely enveloped in a warm, protective golden light. The deadly arrows bounce harmlessly off the glowing barrier, scattering across the stone pavement around him. Out of the glowing light, a beautiful white gown gently sways as a silver-haired girl steps forward. With a soft, exhausted sigh, she quietly whispers how incredibly glad she is to have made it in time. The prince's jaw literally drops as he stares up at the mysterious woman who just saved his life. He is completely mesmerized by the ethereal figure standing amidst the swirling golden magical circles. Surrounded by a breathtaking display of blooming blue flowers and glowing particles, Namia gently tilts her head, politely asking if His Highness is unheard. Talk about an absolutely stunning entrance. The artist went all out on this panel. It is officially revealed to the shocked prince that his savior is none other than Namia Lopira, the supposedly useless girl from the scroll department. She stands before him looking like a literal guardian angel. Let's appreciate how epic this golden barrier looks. Even though she's completely exhausted, Namia managed to maintain a flawless giant defensive dome that shielded the entire courtyard from a military-grade ambush. Kairos continues to stare at her with wide, bewildered eyes. He's trying to process how a low-ranking civil servant possessed the raw power and preparation to pull off a miracle of this scale. Seriously, right? The romantic tension in this scene is off the charts. Bathed in soft blue floral light, Namia looks back at him with an angelic smile, completely oblivious to the fact that she just rewrote the entire empire's history. Breaking the romantic atmosphere, the knight captain spots the fleeing assassin in the crowd. He lets out an angry shout, commanding the imperial guards to pursue the hooded culprit through the chaotic streets. The knight commander swiftly organizes his men, leaving 2 guards to protect the prince while the rest of the cavalry charges after the attackers. They absolutely cannot let the mastermind behind this escape. Back in their private bubble, Kairos slowly takes Namia's delicate hand as she helps him up. The contrast between his dark armor and her bright, glowing aura creates an incredibly beautiful visual. Staring at her calm face, Kairos is deeply intrigued by her composure. He wonders how a normal noblewoman can remain so incredibly peaceful and collected right after surviving a lethal assassination attempt. He notes that she truly possesses a majestic presence, but then he leans in to ask a very critical question. He wants to know if she seriously activated this absurdly massive quantity of defensive scrolls all by herself. Kairos tilts his head, waiting for her answer, but he notices her sapphire blue eyes suddenly starting to glaze over and lose their focus. Uh-oh, something is definitely wrong here. Nami's internal monologue screams in pure panic. She suddenly remembers that even the simplest scroll activation requires a tiny bit of mana, and activating a whopping 172 scrolls at once means her mana pool is completely empty. Oblivious to her impending collapse, Kairos politely gestures, admitting that while her extreme intervention was technically unnecessary for a Dragonian, he deeply respects her brave heart for trying to protect the royal family. He generously offers to grant her absolutely anything she desires as a royal reward, but before he can even finish his sentence, Namia's knees completely buckle under her, and her feet begin to slip. Thud! With a soft gasp, Namia's exhausted body collapses forward, falling directly into the Crown Prince's firm, armored chest. Kairos freezes in complete shock as she loses all consciousness. Holding her limp body in his arms, the prince panics, calling out her name as her silver hair cascades over his shoulder. This went from an epic battle scene to a classic K-drama romance trope real quick. He looks down at her pale, sweating face, realizing she has completely pushed her physical and magical limits to the absolute brink just to keep him safe. Her breathing is shallow and she is totally out cold. Panic completely takes over the usually cold prince as he shouts, desperately asking if she has fainted. His stoic composure is completely shattered by this unexpected turn of events. Cut to a hilarious chibi panel where Nami is fast asleep, drooling directly onto the prince's expensive royal cape. She's happily mumbling in her sleep about wanting to eat more meat, leaving a giant question mark over the prince's head. The next thing she knows, Nami wakes up tucked into an incredibly luxurious bed in the Imperial Palace. She is literally in chibi heaven, snuggled under fluffy blankets and enjoying a premium IV drip that feels like pure healing nectar. As she happily comments on how the palace's medical fluids are so good they could probably revive the dead, a cold, sarcastic voice from the side suddenly breaks her joyful bubble, asking if she's comfortable enough. Standing by the door is a handsome, curly-haired doctor wearing a pristine white coat and glasses. An elegant royal plaque introduces him as Luca Klass from the medical health department, and he dryly asks if she is finally feeling better. Sitting by her bedside, Luca immediately starts aggressively nagging her like a worried parent. He scolds her for her terrible nutritional status and demands to know what she usually eats. Namiya can only sigh, pulling the blanket over her face and begging the grumpy doctor to stop lecturing her. Luca desperately clenches his fists, mentally chanting a prayer to calm himself down. He repeatedly tells himself that the opponent is just a patient, so he shouldn't lose his temper. But seeing Namiya treat the premium, life-saving Royal Ivy drip like it's some kind of casual soda is pushing him straight to his absolute limit. Namiya looks up at him with her large, dazzling blue galaxy eyes, completely oblivious to his boiling rage. She softly tilts her head and lets out a confused hum as she looks at the grumpy doctor, wondering on earth why he is so worked up over a simple compliment about the palace medicine. Luca lets out an irritated growl, pointing to his own chest in pure exasperation. He snaps that while the Crown Prince did bring her here, he was the literal doctor who worked himself to the bone prescribing and preparing this high-grade IV fluid. Talk about wanting some basic respect for his medical degree. Luca completely snaps, leaping to his feet and slamming his hands down in a dramatic display of hurt pride. He yells that she has been ignoring his greatness ever since their academy days when he graciously acknowledged her as his ultimate rival. Meanwhile, a chibi Namiya just sweat drops, wondering what ancient history he is suddenly bringing up. Honestly, their dynamic is pure gold. You can tell Luca has been holding on to this one-sided rivalry for years, while Namiya literally didn't even notice. Once the comical screaming match settles down, Namiya quietly lies back on her pillows, staring up at the grand canopy of her bed. The heavy weight of reality slowly settles back into her mind as she gets a moment of quiet peace. Sitting with his back turned to her, Luca's angry demeanor completely melts away, replaced by a somber and heavily weighted silence. He gazes out of the brightly lit window, his shoulders slumping as he prepares to address a very sensitive, painful topic that he has been avoiding. Namiya turns her head to look at him as he quietly mutters that her family is still exactly the same as always. Hearing those words, a faint chill passes through the room, making her heart sink as the harsh reality of her familial situation is dragged right back into the light. Luca rustles through her medical chart, his brow furrowing deeper with every line he reads. He turns back to her with a deeply concerned frown, demanding to know if she is seriously still skipping meals and only eating a single measly meal every single day. Standard anime and manhwa diet right there, folks, surviving on nothing but pure magic and sheer willpower. Luca continues to lecture her, arguing that even if the scroll management department is considered the lowest of the low, she is still a registered civil servant of the Imperial Palace. With a decent salary like hers, showing up with severe malnutrition is downright ridiculous. Luca brings up a portrait of Baron Roafi, revealing that the greedy old man has recently been borrowing massive sums of money from anyone he can find to fund another useless business. Hearing this, Namiya completely freaks out, bolting upright in pure shock over her adoptive father's endless greed, while a panicked Luca desperately yells at her to lie back down before she rips her IV out. Clutching her forehead in absolute agony, Namiya feels a massive headache coming on. She groans, muttering to herself that she is seriously going crazy, and questions why on earth she has to suffer so much stress because of a garbage family that doesn't even care about her survival. Closing her brilliant sapphire eyes, she takes a long, slow breath to compose herself. She knows there is absolutely no point in crying over spilled milk or stressing about things that have already happened in the past, so she just has to figure out her next move. Our girl is a true wage slave champion. Even in a fantasy world, the struggle of living paycheck to paycheck on overtime pay is way too relatable. Cut to a hilarious chibi screen where Namiya cheerfully notes that at least her greedy stepfather didn't touch her precious overtime allowance, which is surprisingly livable. Luca's chibi head pops up in absolute horror, yelling in disbelief that she was actually surviving solely on overtime pay. Running a hand through his curly brown hair, Luca sighs, admitting that he doesn't fully understand her private family circumstances and shouldn't speak on them so easily. But as her doctor and former classmate, seeing her constantly neglect her own health genuinely pains him. Namiya quietly listens to his soft scolding, staring at him with a neutral but deeply contemplative expression. She knows he genuinely worries for her well-being, which is a rare and precious thing in her otherwise incredibly cold and transaction-based life. Luca leans forward, gesturing with his hand as he warns her about her utterly incompetent older brother Juan as well. He firmly advises her that it is honestly in her best interest to completely cut ties and stop associating with toxic, leeching humans like them. Wait, is that a direct attack on her brother or friendly warning? Honestly, Luca's speaking straight facts here. Namiya stares at him in silence for a brief moment, her eyes softening as she quietly utters his name. The atmosphere in the medical room suddenly shifts, turning slightly tense and laden with unspoken emotions. With a completely straight face, Namiya casually drops a massive bomb, asking if he behaves this way because he secretly likes her. Lucas's jaw literally drops to the floor, his face flushing bright red as he lets out a shocked, high-pitched scream of pure embarrassment. Luca immediately tries to play it cool, raising a hand and loudly pretending that he didn't hear a single word of her ridiculous question. A smug chibi Namiya just smiles from her bed, calling him out for trying so hard to feign ignorance, before teasingly adding that she was only joking. Luca completely blows his top, aggressively lecturing her that there are some jokes you simply do not make to a busy doctor. In a hilarious chibi exchange, he yells that he only hates seeing her held back by a toxic family instead of competing with him at full strength, all while diligently changing her finished IV bag like the absolute professional he is. Oh wow, talk about a major lore drop! So our brilliant heroine isn't even a real member of this toxic noble household? No wonder they treat her like a human ATM. A grand family portrait of the Roafi family is shown, with Namiya's figure completely crossed out in red. She reveals that she isn't actually the Baron's biological child, which explains why he shamelessly steals her hard-earned salary. Yet she continues to endure this crappy family solely to find a critical piece of hidden information. We see a beautiful, nostalgic flashback of a young, silver-haired Namiya happily walking through a field of blooming blue flowers, holding the hand of a tall, silver-haired man. This mysterious figure is clearly someone deeply precious to her past, and finding clues about him is her ultimate goal. Returning to the present, Namiya sits on the edge of the bed and sips her tea, stating that she must quietly cater to the Baron's whims a little longer until she achieves her objective. Luca can only watch her with a worried frown, acknowledging that while she is capable, her plan is incredibly risky. Luca crosses his arms and points out a massive, gaping flaw in her plan of living a quiet, low-profile life. He asks her if she seriously thinks keeping a low profile is even possible anymore after what she just pulled off in the courtyard. Yeah, good luck trying to play the incompetent extra card after summoning a giant golden holy dome that deflected a literal military ambush. In another cute chibi panel, Luca explains that rumors are already spreading like wildfire throughout the entire Imperial Palace that a low-ranking girl from the scroll department was the one who meticulously saved the Crown Prince's life, and she is guaranteed to receive a massive reward. Luca vividly recalls the scandalous scene of the cold, untouchable Crown Prince personally carrying the unconscious Namiya in his arms right in front of the entire royal court. He sweat drops, thinking about how that jaw-dropping sight has already become the hottest gossip topic in the Empire. Despite the brewing storm of attention, Namiya remains the absolute queen of composure, elegantly lifting her cup to take another slow, peaceful sip of her warm tea. Luca stares at her in complete bewilderment, utterly baffled by how she can remain this calm when her entire life is about to get turned upside down. Namiya gently lowers her cup, looking at him with a knowing, highly amused smile. She tells him that there is one massive, critical detail about her workplace that he has completely overlooked in all his worrying. She rests her delicate hand on the wooden nightstand, a soft tap echoing through the room. Mischievously, with a mysterious glint in her eyes, she begins to explain that the scroll management department is actually far more unique than anyone realizes. Look at this absolutely gorgeous art. The artist really said, "Let me remind everyone everyone who the main character is with the stunning floral background. Surrounded by a breathtaking blooming garden of purple flowers, Namiya proudly declares that her department is thoroughly and completely incompetent. She plans to use their useless reputation as the perfect shield to deflect any unwanted attention or credit. Meanwhile, deep inside his grand, dimly lit office, Crown Prince Kiaro sits at his desk, resting his chin on his fist as he reflects on the attack. He notes that the assassin immediately committed suicide upon capture, leaving the royal guards with zero leads despite chasing them for months. Kiaro slowly taps his desk, his red eyes burning with deep suspicion. He notes that the timing was far too perfect to be a simple coincidence, wondering if the enemies somehow knew his rare second Dark Age was coming. Just as he gets lost in his dark thoughts, a soft voice suddenly calls out to him. Standing politely at the doorway is Kiaro's loyal brown-haired aide, Chase Wood, who bows elegantly. He softly apologizes for disturbing the Crown Prince while he is so deeply engrossed in his busy thoughts. Oh no! I have a very bad feeling about this. Whenever the high-ranking ministers get involved, things always end up turning into a massive disaster. Chase walks up to the desk, reporting that the high-ranking ministers have finally reached an official decision regarding how to handle Nami Arofi's involvement in the incident. Kiaros nods, expecting them to bestow a grand reward fit for saving the Empire's future emperor. But Chase drops a massive bombshell, revealing that the ministers have actually decided to issue a severe disciplinary action against Namiya. Kiaros freezes, his eyes widening in pure, unadulterated shock as he lets out a stunned exclamation. The atmosphere in the room instantly turns pitch black as a heavy, suffocating dark aura begins to seep out of the prince. The words disciplinary action echo in his mind, completely triggering his immense dormant anger. Kiaro's face contorts into a mixture of disbelief and pure fury. He demands to know if he heard correctly. Unable to comprehend why the woman who literally prevented his death is being punished instead of celebrated. Seriously? These greedy old ministers are really trying to punish the girl who saved their prince? Talk about absolute clowns. Chase sweat drops under the prince's terrifying glare, quickly explaining the absurd reasoning behind the council's decision. He nervously confirms that they are indeed moving forward with the punishment. Kiaros's red eyes flare up like burning coals of pure rage as Chase explains the official charge. The ministers are punishing her for arbitrarily increasing the quantity of defense scrolls beyond the officially reported limit without prior approval. Leaning forward with a terrifying demonic red glow in his eyes, Kiaros growls, asking if these corrupt fools honestly believe the cost of a few scrolls is more important than his entire life. Chase can only sweat, noting that the civil servants blindly prioritize useless administrative formalities over actual life-saving results. Kiaros recalls a frustrating memory of a smug, high-ranking official arrogantly dismissing a low-ranking worker. The official sneeringly claimed that they told her to do it anyway, haughtily asking who on earth she thought she was to dare voice an opinion. The arrogant official looked down his nose with absolute disgust, coldly spitting out that she is nothing but a lowly, worthless, low-ranking employee who should simply shut her mouth and do as she is told. Talk about a punchable face. Whew, Kiaros is definitely going to ruin this man's entire career, and honestly, I am absolutely here for it. Kiaros narrows his eyes, clenching his hands together as he realizes that simple administrative formality isn't the only reason these greedy nobles are targeting Namiya. There is definitely a deeper, more malicious political play happening behind the scenes. Chase quickly tries to calm his lord down, stating that the imperial family will still bestow a commendation according to royal precedent, and they will personally look deeper into this absurd disciplinary action. Kiaros coldly replies that he has already taken his own private measures regarding her reward. The prince reveals that he has personally sent a direct private letter regarding Namiya's magic to none other than the legendary Tower Master of the Magic Tower, meaning the absolute truth will soon be brought to light. We see a back view of the mysterious long-haired master holding an ornate staff. Chase completely loses his mind, grabbing his head in absolute panic and screaming in sheer disbelief. He yells that the legendary, reclusive Tower Master would never be interested in worldly imperial matters, completely shocked that the prince went to such extreme lengths. Wait, the Magic Tower? That sounds like the ultimate neutral powerhouse of this world. A majestic lore panel introduces the Magic Tower, a grand celestial institution that governs all magic and houses the Empire's greatest magical researchers. It's revealed that they have absolutely zero interest in royal politics, especially the current dark-skinned, white-haired Tower Master who lives in complete reclusive isolation. A grand golden coat of arms of the Plariwood Empire is displayed. The narrator explains that while almost all public affairs and administrative departments in the capital city belong directly to the imperial family, family, there is one massive exception. We see the beautiful, jewel-encrusted emblems of the major imperial ministries, the Ministry of Justice, the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Health and Welfare, and the Ministry of Education, all glowing in brilliant, vibrant colors. But the Scroll Management Department's emblem is revealed to be a giant glowing blue crystal representing the Magic Tower itself. Because the Scroll Department is technically a direct branch of the Magic Tower and not the Imperial Palace, the corrupt ministers have absolutely no legal authority to touch or discipline Namia. Talk about the ultimate legal loophole. Crown Prince Kiaros reflects on the strategic significance of the Scroll Management Department, explaining that it is the single sector in the entire palace where the Imperial family's authority is legally blocked. He reveals that his entire reason for infiltrating Kiban to secure official access in the first place was to bypass these precise restrictions, though he notes with a quiet sigh that his sense of genuine gratitude was also a major factor. The recollection of his grueling secret operations and the absolute mountain of political headaches ahead of him causes Kiaros to pinch the bridge of his nose in sheer exhaustion, sighs, feeling a dull, throbbing pain blossom right behind his eyes. Rewinding the clock to exactly 1 hour prior, we see Kiaros sitting comfortably at his polished desk, enveloped in the warm golden light of his personal office. Feeling a rare pocket of free time in his packed schedule, he wonders if he should pass the minutes by pulling up and reviewing some of the latest internal administrative files directly from the Scroll Management Department. Suddenly, a brilliant red magical light hologram flashes directly in front of the young man's face, catching him completely off guard as he lets out a startled gasp. The crimson light casts a stark, ominous glow across the room, indicating that a highly secure barrier has just been violently triggered. The Crimson warning message explicitly states that access is strictly forbidden because the authorization was revoked following the sudden resignation of Kiban Altis on October 20th, with the processing agent listed as none other than Namia Lawapi. Seriously, talk about an absolute mic drop moment from Namia. She didn't just walk out of her job, she literally locked down the entire Imperial database on her way out the door. The brown-haired investigator stares blankly at the screen as he vividly recalls Namia casually packing her cardboard boxes and throwing out a nonchalant farewell about not coming in the next day. He is completely flabbergasted, left wondering what absolute force of nature this woman truly is to have processed a high-level resignation with such terrifying, lightning-fast efficiency. Back in the present, Crown Prince Kiaros leans his head far back against his grand chair, staring up at his ceiling in sheer amazement sighs, as he admits he fully expected her to drag her feet for at least a week before the resignation cleared. He is utterly baffled by her work ethic, struggling to comprehend how she managed to craft a massive pile of high-grade defense scrolls overnight and still find the energy to immediately finalize her departure papers.
He sits in quiet contemplation, the bright sunlight casting a brilliant golden glow over his sharp features as he tries to decipher the complex enigma that is Namia Rofi. The quiet room is thick with suspense as Kiaros tries to figure out her ultimate game plan. The tranquil silence is suddenly interrupted when Chase Wood politely raises a hand, stepping forward with a soft, nervous smile to capture his master's drifting attention. And Chase sweat drops, pointing out that if the Crown Prince simply wishes to reward Namia, he could easily do so directly without dragging the reclusive Tower Master into the equation. Kiaros smoothly dismisses this, explaining that because he knows absolutely nothing about the complex intricacies of scroll making, obtaining an official assessment from the ultimate magical authority is a must. Chase's cute chibi panic in the background is absolute gold. The poor guy is just trying to survive the endless pile of royal paperwork while his boss plays 4D chess. Chase tilts his head in mild confusion, realizing that the Crown Prince is dead set on ensuring Namia receives a reward that is not only grand, but completely unassailable by any of the corrupt political factions at court. Kiaros lets out a surprisingly soft, remarkably tender smile, looking like a literal fairy tale prince surrounded by a breathtaking canvas of blooming yellow flowers. Seeing this unusually gentle expression on his notoriously cold lord, Chase wears an incredibly smug, highly amused chibi grin, which immediately prompts Kiaros to snap back to reality and demand to know why his aide is looking at him with such a deeply unpleasant face. Chase instantly waves his hands in frantic, sweating denial, laughing nervously as he assures his master that there is absolutely nothing on his mind, all while Kiaros glares back with a highly suspicious deadpan stare. In his head, Chase is completely lost in a wild, sparkling fantasy straight out of a cheesy romance novel, imagining Kiaros dramatically pulling Namia close while declaring she is the first woman to ever save him.
I cannot stop laughing at how Chase is basically a self-insert romance fanfic writer at this point. He's ready to plan their entire wedding based on a single 3-second smile. With a look of absolute burning determination, Chase locks eyes with his master and gives a firm, confident thumbs up, silently vowing to guard their secret romance with his very life, leaving a totally defeated Kiaros to internally sigh at how his aide has completely missed the point. Kiros mentally face palms, thinking about how Chase is exceptionally brilliant at his duties, but remains utterly clueless when it comes to normal human interactions, right before a loud rhythmic knock on his office door breaks his train of thought. Royal Guard steps quickly into the room, standing at attention to deliver a highly anticipated update. Namiya Loapi has finally regained consciousness. The very instant the words leave the guard's mouth, Kiaro stands up so fast his chair practically flies backward, declaring he will head to the infirmary immediately, which throws the reporting guard into a sudden panic. The guard's sweat drops, stammering that the moment Namiya woke up, she bypassed the recovery room entirely and went straight back to her regular office. Both Kiaros and Chase freeze in place, their cartoonish chibi faces twisted into pure, unadulterated shock. Okay, this girl's literally the ultimate corporate slave. Waking up from a near-death experience and immediately clocking in is a level of dedication that is honestly a little terrifying. Meanwhile, back at the magnificent, sunlit building housing the Scroll Management Department, a group of lower-ranking civil servants can be seen whispering excitedly to one another in the grand corridors. The gossip mill is running at absolute full speed, with several employees scoffing in disdain as they wonder why on earth anyone would waste so many precious scrolls, whispering that saving the Crown Prince was an entirely pointless and unnecessary waste of resources. So, sitting at her grand wooden desk in a deep navy gown, Namiya lets out a quiet, tired sigh. Whew! Feeling the heavy, toxic atmosphere of the workplace actively draining her limited physical energy. She notes with a dry internal chuckle that it seems nobody in this lazy department has even a shred of desire to actually do their jobs. A miniature chibi angel version of Luca hovers near her ear, shouting that he explicitly warned her to take a proper rest day, while a tiny chibi devil mischievously reminds her that unused vacation days get converted into cold, hard cash at the end of the fiscal year. Honestly, I have never related to a fantasy main character more in my entire life. The allure of that sweet, sweet vacation payout is more powerful than any legendary defense magic. Suddenly, a blazing aura of pure, unadulterated capitalist greed ignites behind Namiya, her fist clenching so hard her knuckles turn white as she fiercely vows to secure her precious vacation bonus no matter what. Outside her office door, two male coworkers watch her with a mixture of confusion and pity, noting that she's back at her desk despite her heavy injuries, just as a massive, incredibly loud rumble echoes directly from Namiya's empty stomach. Resting her delicate hand against her chin, Namiya temporarily pushes aside her hunger to focus on her grand strategy, realizing that to navigate the chaotic storms ahead, she must find a reliable way to get closer to Crown Prince Kiros. She recalls the exact moment her entire life changed, when a sudden violent headache struck her out of nowhere, forcing her to her knees as she unlocked the shocking truth that her entire reality was actually just a story written in a book. The classic isekai headache strikes again. It's basically the universal licensing agreement for getting cheat code knowledge of the future in these stories.
Because of those unlocked memories, she possessed advanced knowledge of the horrific assassination plot against the Crown Prince, an explosive tragedy that was originally destined to trigger a devastating continent-wide war. The stunning illustration captures a younger Namiya standing gracefully amidst a sea of radiant blue blossoms, holding a heavy volume close to her chest as she silently shoulders the weight of the world's hidden destiny. Knowing she has successfully altered the timeline by saving Kiros, she realizes she must now uncover the sinister mastermind orchestrating the attacks. As a mere low-ranking civil servant with zero political authority, her best course of action is to quietly assist the Crown Prince from the shadows. She chews her lip anxiously, fully aware that by derailing the original plot, she has stepped into completely uncharted territory. The shadowy figures targeting the throne certainly won't back down, and their next strike will likely be far more ruthless and unpredictable. Changing the canon story always sounds great until the plot armor wears off and the villains start improvising. She's definitely going to need more than just defense scrolls for the next round. Elsewhere in the department, a stern, gray-haired senior official sits at his desk with his arms tightly crossed, his face darkened with immense irritation as his fingers rhythmically and aggressively tap against the polished wood. He lets out a sharp, venomous click of his tongue, his lips curling into an ugly, resentful sneer as his anger reaches an absolute boiling point. Standing up abruptly, he stomps down the long palace corridor, his heavy leather boots echoing loudly against the cold stone floor with every aggressive step.
Just as Namiya is wondering if Kairos will summon her for an official commendation, the door is violently slammed open as her furious superior barges in, demanding a direct talk. Instantly, Namiya's internal subordinate employee survival switch flips on, preparing her to face the incoming corporate scolding. That subordinate employee switch on is a universal defense mechanism. We've all had to activate that exact same blank, polite stare when a manager starts power tripping. Wearing a perfectly innocent, completely blank expression, Namiya politely asks if there's something he needs, which only causes her boss's veins to pop in sheer outrage as he screams that she's completely dragged their department's reputation through the mud. He points an accusing finger directly at her face, yelling that the number of scrolls recorded in the official inventory report is completely different from what she actually used, furiously demanding to know why she disregarded his explicit instructions that 6 scrolls would be more than enough. The official keeps screaming, arrogantly claiming that the crown prince would have been perfectly safe even without her scrolls. Namiya stares back with a hollow, deadpan look, internally noting that Kairos had a literal 100% mortality rate in the original book, though she wisely chooses to keep that world-saving fact to herself. The man continues his dramatic tirade, bellowing that if she wanted to show off her magical talents so badly, she should have joined the prestigious magic tower instead of ruining his quiet department. This guy's logic is absolutely mind-boggling. He's literally mad at her for being too good at her job because it ruins his department's lazy aesthetic. He pauses, a dark, deeply vindictive smirk creeping across his face as he prepares to deliver a highly satisfying verbal low blow. He mockingly points out that the elite magic tower would never accept an academy dropout with such terrible grades, snidely claiming that her useless reputation was the only reason she ended up in their bottom-tier department anyway, prompting the surrounding staff to whisper in malicious agreement. Namiya's hands slowly clench into tight, trembling fists beneath her desk, her mind drifting back to the real reason she chose this path as her boss continues to arrogantly look down on her. A warm, nostalgic memory flashes before her eyes, showing her as a joyful young girl sitting on a wooden floor, surrounded by old books as she happily sketched magical blueprints simply because she genuinely loved the art of scroll making. Back in the cold reality of the office, her boss coldly declares that this entire mess is solely her fault, leaving Namiya to internally sigh, fully expecting the standard bureaucratic punishment of being forced to write a formal letter of apology. He slams his hand violently on her desk, screaming at her to write a letter of apology immediately and demanding to know why she isn't answering him. Seriously, someone needs to get this manager a glass of water and a chill pill. The amount of raw, unbridled rage he has over a minor reporting discrepancy is actually hilarious. With a perfectly calm, deadpan, chibi expression, she quietly replies with a simple, "Understood," which only makes her boss explode with literal cartoon fire, screaming that she needs to say, "I'm sorry," instead of "understood." The room suddenly falls into a heavy, suffocating silence as Namiya stands perfectly still, her face completely hidden in shadow as she reaches her absolute limit. Gritting her teeth so hard her jaw aches, she delivers a cold, trembling apology, promising to submit the requested letter of apology by the absolute end of the workday today. But her compliance isn't enough to satisfy his fragile ego. The boss completely loses his mind, pointing a trembling finger toward the exit as he screams at the top of his lungs that she is officially fired from the scroll management department, effective immediately. Just as the furious manager screams his final spit-flying ultimatum demanding to know if Namiya understands her termination, the heavy, suffocating aura in the room suddenly drops to absolute zero. But before Namiya can even pack up her desk, the massive wooden entrance doors suddenly swing wide open, cutting the toxic rant short as a smooth, deeply commanding voice echoes throughout the office, dryly noting how incredibly interesting this little scene is. Walking inside with slow, heavy footsteps, the mysterious visitor calmly asks since when a lowly team leader had the absolute authority to fire Imperial Palace staff without getting direct permission from the royal family first. The manager freezes up, his face turning a chaotic shade of pale blue. Namiya's eyes widen in sheer disbelief as she stumbles backward, gasping out, "Your Majesty," while her sweating manager instantly turns into a shivering, terrified mess, realizing the ultimate boss of the entire empire has just walked through their doors. Honestly, seeing this power-tripping manager instantly turn into a trembling puddle of sweat the second a royal shows up is the most satisfying corporate justice ever. He went from peak tyrant to absolute zero in less than a second. Standing tall with a blazing, majestic presence, Crown Prince Kiaros demands to know exactly where the head minister of this lazy department is hiding. Panic-stricken and sweating bullets, another staff member stammers out an excuse before sprinting out of the room like an absolute track star to fetch the head minister before the prince decides to execute everyone on the spot. Kiros ignores the frantic scrambling, turning his sharp, intense gaze directly onto Namiya, while calmly mentioning that he only dropped by to visit his life-saving benefactor, yet found the entire department in an incredibly noisy, chaotic uproar. The entire background instantly shifts into a sparkly, rose-filled shoujo romance fantasy landscape as the two stand face-to-face, making Namiya look incredibly tiny compared to Kiros' towering, ridiculously handsome frame. Look at this height difference and the sudden excessive flower petals. The artist really went all out to remind us that despite the corporate thriller vibe, this is still very much a fantasy romance manhwa. Within seconds, the bald, round head minister arrives, practically tripping over his own feet as he rubs his hands together with a desperate, sweating smile, trying to laugh off the sheer terror gripping his heart. Bowing deeply, the minister nervously asks what grand business could possibly bring the brilliant son of the empire down to such an incredibly dusty, humble little corner of the palace. Without wasting any breath on pleasantries, Kairos directly calls out the sweating manager, Asan, asking the minister if it was his direct order to fire an exceptionally talented civil servant. Asan practically chokes on his own spit, stuttering that he was simply carrying out standard workplace disciplinary procedures. Sitting frozen at her desk, Namiya nervously glances at the towering prince beside her, internally crying as she wonders how on earth a routine firing conversation managed to turn into a high-stakes life-or-death royal tribunal. Namiya just wanted to get fired so she could collect her severance pay and live a lazy life, but the prince had to go and ruin her early retirement plans. Talk about suffering from success. The room's temperature drops even further as the crown prince addresses the trembling minister once again. With cold, piercing red eyes, Kiaros asks if the minister truly believes it is logical to severely punish and dismiss Miss Namiya, the very person who bravely threw herself into mortal danger to save the future ruler of the entire empire. The heavy weight of his words hits the room like an absolute sledgehammer, leaving the manager and minister completely paralyzed with pure terror, while a cold, icy shiver runs straight down Namiya's spine. Even though the prince doesn't raise his voice or make a single aggressive move, his massive ancient dragonkin heritage flares to life behind him, radiating a terrifying, blood-chilling pressure that presses heavily against everyone's skin. Wow, the artist's choice to draw a literal shadowy dragon silhouette behind Kairos is incredibly epic. It really sells the fact that he's not just a prince, but a literal descendant of overpowered dragon beasts. As Osan frantically stammers that this was all just a massive, tragic misunderstanding, Kiaros completely ignores his pathetic whimpering and calmly calls out to his loyal assistant, Chase, to step forward. Chase steps up and cleanly flips open a thick, detailed ledger of official records, while the prince dryly comments that upon closer inspection, the entire internal management of this lazy department is an absolute chaotic disaster. The prince calmly reads off the shocking list of crimes, revealing that Osan has been systematically embezzling the department's core operating funds, while the bald minister actively covered it up in exchange for a fat cut of the stolen cash. The two corrupt officials look like they've seen a literal ghost, screaming in their heads how on earth the royal family uncovered their deepest secrets. Meanwhile, Chibi Namiya is furiously scribbling away at her desk, keeping one ear swiveled completely backward to absorb all the juicy workplace drama, proving that a true corporate slave's ultimate survival skill is always listening to the office tea while pretending to work. This is honestly the most relatable thing ever. Who hasn't pretended to be super focused on typing while actually eavesdropping on some spicy workplace gossip happening right next to him? Resting his large hand firmly onto the wooden surface of Namiya's desk, Kiaros sternly declares that as the crown prince, he can no longer allow such corrupt and highly illegal behavior to run rampant inside his palace. He then drops an absolute bombshell of an announcement declaring that effective immediately, he will be personally taking over and managing the scroll management department himself. Namiya's jaw practically drops straight to the floor in pure, unadulterated horror. Bald Minister weakly stammers that the elite magic tower hasn't given any official word on this takeover, but Kiaros completely cuts him off by stating that his detailed written instructions will be delivered shortly, ignoring their pathetic whining entirely. As the reality of the situation sets in, the surrounding coworkers fade into a deep, depressing blue shadow, realizing that having the strict, hyper-efficient crown prince as their direct supervisor means their lazy, do-nothing corporate lifestyle is officially dead and buried. Imagine having your incredibly lazy department suddenly taken over by the literal prince of the empire. Say goodbye to long lunch breaks and sneaking out early, guys. Namiya flinches in surprise as the prince suddenly speaks her full name aloud, turning his intense gaze back onto her trembling form. With a ridiculously handsome, glowing smirk that practically radiates dazzling sparkles, Kiaros commands Namiya to stand up and follow him out of the office right this second. Though she is incredibly relieved to finally get a golden opportunity to speak with the prince in private, Namiya can't help but feel a deep, mounting sense of anxiety about what he actually wants from her. Walking down the massive, high-ceiling marble corridor with matching synchronized footsteps, Namiya quietly laments that she definitely did not expect her grand plan to get closer to the prince to unfold in such a wildly dramatic public fashion. Well, she did say she wanted to get closer to the crown prince, but getting her entire department audited and taken over on day one is certainly one way to make an impression. Talk about an extreme icebreaker. Suddenly, Kiaros turns his incredibly handsome face toward her, surrounded by a radiant wall of sparkling blue blossoms, calmly explaining that walking so far behind him will only make it highly uncomfortable for them to have a proper conversation. He abruptly halts his long strides, standing perfectly still in the empty hallway and waiting patiently for her to catch up to him. Namiya's heart skips a nervous beat as she processes his words, her mind racing with sheer panic as she realizes this high and mighty royal actually wants a lowly civil servant like her to walk right beside him as an equal. She swallows hard, fully aware that walking side by side with the literal heir to the throne is a ridiculously conspicuous act that will instantly make her the prime target of every gossiping noble in the palace. In the world of noble politics, walking next to the crown prince is basically the fantasy equivalent of announcing you're dating on social media. No wonder Namiya is absolutely panicking. Kiaros gives her a quiet, expectant glance over his shoulder, leaving Namiya with absolutely no choice but to awkwardly drag her feet forward to match his pace. Slowly and nervously, she takes a few tentative steps forward until she is walking right alongside the massive prince, her face burning with sheer embarrassment under his calm, unbothered gaze. Seeing her comply, an incredibly subtle, remarkably gentle smile graces the prince's lips, his sharp features softening as they continue their walk down the silent, sunlit corridor. But behind this peaceful, heart-fluttering moment lies a highly precarious and incredibly dangerous political reality, as the massive, sprawling empire is currently sitting on the brink of absolute chaos. The world design here is actually super cool. A massive circular fortress city nestled right in the middle of a giant crater. The artist's world-building visuals are seriously top tier. Though it remains a highly classified secret kept strictly away from the public, the reigning emperor has fallen gravely ill and has quietly fled the capital to recuperate in deep hiding, leaving the throne dangerously vulnerable. To make matters worse, Kiaros' stepmother, the current empress, is a former hardened mercenary who completely detests palace politics, while her young son, Prince Jaden, is a mere 8-year-old child, far too young to hold any real power. In Namiya's wild imagination, she vividly pictures the poor crown prince physically crushed under a mountain of giant boulders labeled with his exhausting responsibilities, like assassination threats, useless family members, and corrupt politics, making her feel a sudden wave of deep pity for him. I love how Namiya's brain instantly visualizes his trauma as literal cartoon boulders. She's basically treating the future emperor like a highly stressed out middle manager who desperately needs a vacation. Because of his incredibly demanding life, Kiaros has grown to strictly value cold practicality above all else, which has also kept him entirely free from any noble fiancés, romantic scandals, or dramatic court affairs. Namiya lets out a quiet, tired sigh, closing her eyes as she mentally prepares herself for the absolute worst, fully aware of the massive storm she's about to walk straight into. Her fears are immediately confirmed as they pass by several palace maids and guards who stare at them with wide, absolute shock and burning jealousy, gasping that the prince is walking alone with a low-ranking civil servant. Namiya internally cries, knowing the entire palace will be flooded with juicy rumors by tomorrow morning. The maid in the background is literally biting her handkerchief in pure anime-style jealousy while the background literally catches fire. The drama in this palace is incredibly high tier. They finally arrive at the prince's private study, where a cozy, bright orange fire crackles warmly inside a massive, highly detailed stone fireplace. Standing quietly in front of his grand desk,
Namiya nervously glances at the towering piles of paperwork, internally pleading that he didn't drag her all the way to his private office just to force her to do even more unpaid corporate labor. She suddenly recalls her former male co-worker, who had confidently pushed his glasses up his nose while smugly declaring that he wouldn't be returning to work tomorrow, leaving her to dryly note how incredibly amusing his short-lived confidence actually was. That guy really thought he was making a grand, dramatic exit, only to get completely overshadowed by a literal royal takeover. Talk about terrible timing for a dramatic resignation. But instead of handing her a giant stack of work, Kiros looks down with a surprisingly soft, highly apologetic gaze, quietly whispering that he actually just felt incredibly sorry toward her. Seeing her completely flustered and confused, the prince awkwardly explains that this was actually his very first time ever having a direct junior under his command, so he didn't anticipate things turning out this way. In a hilarious chibi flashback, the prince clutches his quill pen in absolute shock as he laments that he never expected his new subordinates to literally run away in pure terror after receiving just 2 basic work instructions. Wait, did this legendary, terrifying dragon prince actually scare off his entire staff just by asking them to do their actual jobs? He's literally a lonely boss who doesn't know how to socialize. That is unexpectedly adorable. In the flashback, Kairos explains to his assistant that he had simply asked the staff to sort a few magic scrolls, but they just sat there staring blankly back at him, claiming they didn't have the official clearance because the lazy director never actually processed their paperwork. To make matters worse, the lazy employee didn't even bother to finish his assigned tasks during official working hours, casually declaring that he was leaving early anyway, leaving the poor, socially awkward prince completely abandoned at his desk. Kiros rubs his temple in sheer frustration, desperately trying to make sense of the chaotic situation unfolding inside his private office. He can barely believe the absolute disaster class his newly acquired scroll department has turned out to be. Chibi Kiros and Chibi Namiya's heads float in the air as they mentally review the profile of the escaped intern. Kiros remembers that the Imperial internship only selects top-tier international talents, while Namiya suddenly realizes the guy was a foreigner, which explains why he was so incredibly out of the loop. Namiya pinches her chin in quiet regret, realizing she might have ruthlessly badmouthed the poor intern without actually understanding his full background. She decides that to avoid looking like a terrible junior in front of her royal boss, she should probably find at least one nice thing to praise about the guy. Ah yes, the classic badmouthing your coworker only to immediately feel guilty trope. Standard office protocol. In her mind's eye, she recalls the intern's handsome, well-built figure, only to realize the prince is staring right back at her with wide, startled red eyes. Kiros' heart skips a beat as he listens to her unexpected praise, completely caught off guard. Kairos' glowing crimson eye narrows in sheer panic. Tremble, realizing he is in deep trouble. He had deliberately transformed his face into a perfectly average, mundane appearance to avoid attracting any unwanted attention, but now this girl is calling him handsome. He looks down at Namiya with a suspicious, heavily sweat-dropping expression, internally questioning if this low-ranking civil servant has somehow fallen hopelessly in love with him. Look at the absolute delusion radiating from this prince. He really thinks every woman who compliments his average face is instantly swooning. Boy, get your royal ego checked. Suddenly, the heavy office doors swing wide open as Chase bursts into the room shouting, loudly calling out for His Highness in a frantic panic. Chase is completely oblivious to the intense mental calculations happening between the prince and his new junior. Chase halts his steps as he senses an incredibly tense, highly charged atmosphere lingering in the room. He slowly looks back and forth between the sitting prince and the standing Namiya, his mind immediately leaping to the most dramatic conclusion possible. Blushing furiously with his hands clamped tightly over his mouth, Chase squeals in pure delight, dramatically asking if Kairos was in the middle of a marriage proposal. Kairos angrily snaps that it is absolutely nothing like that, while Chibi Namiya stands there in complete deadpan confusion. Chase is literally the ultimate shipper captain of this entire series. Look at him, blushing harder than the actual couple. Clearing his throat to regain a shred of professional dignity, Kiero sternly demands to know what Chase wants, while Chase nervously glances over at Namiya with a sweat drop. He is clearly hesitant to share classified royal secrets in front of a low-ranking department junior. Sensing the awkward tension, Namiya instantly activates her ultimate survival technique, dropping her physical presence down by 40% to become completely transparent.
I absolutely love this visual joke. Every corporate worker who has ever tried to look completely invisible during a tense manager meeting is feeling this on a spiritual level. Chase hesitantly explains that they have finally located the Imperial traitor who's been secretly communicating with the shadowy mastermind they've been chasing. Namia's beautiful blue eyes widen in pure shock, realizing the high-stakes political intrigue is unfolding right in front of her. Kairos calmly asks how they should deal with the newly discovered collaborator, leaving Chase to internally scream in sheer frustration that they should obviously put the suspect under tight, constant surveillance. Chase's inner voice being a chaotic mess while he tries to maintain corporate professionalism is just brilliant. Kairos coldly declares that it would be far better to capture and execute the traitor immediately, but Namia suddenly interrupts him, passionately arguing that they absolutely cannot execute the suspect just yet. Her face is pale with panic as she refutes the future Emperor's direct decision. Reaching her hand out in a desperate plea, tremble, Namia insists that the collaborator must be kept alive at all costs to serve as a vital source of information. Kairos crosses his arms and strictly retorts that leaving such an incredibly dangerous spy inside the Imperial Palace is far too risky, his red eyes glowing with cold authority. Intrigued by her unexpected defiance, Kairos leans in and asks for her reasoning, prompting Namia to explain that a massive convoy protected by the Imperial Guard would have been the perfect decoy. Surrounded by a brilliant halo of blooming white roses, Namia passionately explains that the daring assassins who attacked the prince in broad daylight won't easily give up, meaning they will inevitably try to contact their palace spy again. Wow, the artist really pulled out the entire botanical garden for Namia's speech bubble. That is how you know she is delivering some top-tier main character wisdom. Kairos quietly stares at her in complete fascination, noting how her eyes have suddenly filled with an intense, burning fervor that makes her look like an entirely different person. Namia's heart suddenly drops to her stomach as she realizes she just did the unthinkable, publicly interrupting and refuting the terrifying crown prince. She instantly visualizes her immediate firing, picturing her chibi self being kicked out of the palace with a sad little bundle over her shoulder. Sob, sob! Clutching her hands together in absolute terror, Chibi Namia internally begs the prince not to fire, but she is completely stunned as Kairos lets out a gentle, quiet chuckle. Chuckle hoot hoot. Her bright blue eyes widen in complete disbelief as she stares back at his incredibly handsome face, her mind completely blanking out at his unexpected reaction. Chase warmly pats her on the shoulder while Kairos sincerely thanks her, praising her sharp intellect and admitting that her clever advice has basically saved his life. Namia can only stammer in complete flustered confusion as Chase happily nudges her along. With a dazzling, radiant smile surrounded by sparkling roses, Kairos warmly promises to richly reward her for her incredible bravery and brilliant strategy once this entire ordeal is resolved. A heavy wooden door slams shut, leaving Namia standing completely frozen in the quiet corridor as she tries to process why the prince went out of his way to leak such classified information to her. Her eyes narrow as the terrifying truth finally clicks in her brain, realizing with absolute horror that this crown prince isn't just a powerful dragon, is a cunning, manipulative snake. She realizes Kairos deliberately leaked the secret of the collaborator just to test her reaction and gauge her true loyalties. A literal cartoon snake coiled around a smiling face? That visual is so hilariously accurate. Namia's brain is basically a goldmine for funny metaphors. Back inside the quiet study, Chase stands beside the prince's desk, looking down with a highly impressed, deeply thoughtful expression after Namia's grand exit. Chase smiles warmly, noting that Namia is far smarter than she looks, while Kairos quietly agrees, planning to keep a close eye on her while managing the scroll department, though his thoughts quickly drift back to the looming threat of the Dark Age. A dark purple haze fills the room as Kairos grimly recalls the horrors of the first Dark Age. He vividly remembers the chaotic scene of his childhood, where his trusted allies collapsed on the ground, bleeding and screaming from a ruthlessly poisoned dagger. He looks at a beautiful, glowing portrait of Namia Loapi from behind, her silver hair shimmering in the light. He notes that she saved him with such perfect timing, it almost seemed as if she possessed the magical ability to foresee the exact moment his Dark Age would arrive. Whoa, the transition from comedy back to stunning aesthetic visuals is crazy. Resting his chin on his knuckles, Kairos' eyes glow with intense suspicion as he begins to suspect there might be a dangerous hidden connection between Namia Loapi and the assassins. In a dark, ominous vision, he imagines Namia standing behind him with a cold, beautiful smile, gently covering his eyes with one hand while holding a lethal silver dagger to his throat. She gained my trust, stayed close to me, he notes, realizing just how easily she could destroy him. Chase suddenly breaks his intense train of thought by asking if he is feeling unwell, prompting Kyros to snap back to reality and let out a heavy, exhausted sigh. He silently concludes that since this highly suspicious matter cannot be resolved immediately, his absolute best course of action is to keep Namiya as close to him as possible to constantly monitor her every move. Staring at the dark shadow of his former assistant, Kyros takes comfort in the fact that he can still successfully transform his appearance even during the suffocating constraints of the Dark Age. Turning his sharp gaze onto Chase, Kyros sternly commands him to immediately contact the Crow and gather every single piece of classified information on Namiya Loapi and her noble family. Chase's jaw drops in pure unadulterated shock. Creepy black crows and masked, dark-cloaked figures with glowing red eyes emerge from the shadows. These are the Crows, the Crown Prince's highly secret elite intelligence network that silently operates across every single corner of the Empire. Okay, this goth squad is actually super cool and edgy. No matter how deeply buried a secret might be, these ruthless shadow agents will stop at nothing to fetch whatever classified information their royal master desires. Cairo stands in his grand, gold-trimmed military uniform, with a black crow perched on his hand, holding a glowing red gemstone that represents his absolute, undisputed power over the Empire's shadows. Chase stands frozen in absolute awe, his mind racing as he realizes the prince is deploying his personal Black Ops unit just to dig into a low-ranking civil servant. This is the exact same prince who has famously ignored every single noble lady and romantic scandal for his entire life. Suddenly, Chase's face flushes a bright crimson as he clasps his hands together in pure, starry-eyed romantic delight. He is absolutely thrilled to see his famously cold, romance-free prince finally showing such intense interest in a woman. Chase, my man, your shipping fanfiction is getting a bit too wild. Chase instantly salutes his prince with a massive, goofy grin, enthusiastically promising to find out everything about Miss Namiya right away, leaving Kyros to sweat drop in exasperation at his assistant's wild romantic delusions. Meanwhile, Namiya slowly walks down the massive, empty palace corridor. Clack, clack, her footsteps echoing softly against the cold marble floor. She stares ahead with a deeply serious, highly focused expression, quietly whispering the prince's full name, Kyros Plyerwood, aloud as she mentally prepares for the dangerous game of political chess she has just been dragged into. She shudders as she imagines Kyros' dazzling, smugly smiling face looming over her like a massive, inescapable shadow, internally gasping, screaming that he is far too dangerous and is definitely testing her limits. Clutching her trembling fist tightly against her chest, Namiya closes her eyes as a sudden, unexpected realization washes over her. She recalls the intense, completely honest look in his eyes when he praised her, realizing that despite his terrifying, manipulative nature, Kyros is also the very first person in this entire world who has actually acknowledged her true worth. In a bitter childhood memory, Namiya recalls being harshly scolded by her strict, overbearing father, Shout, who constantly berated her for wasting her time on useless, unnecessary tasks. She looks back at the cold, judgmental faces of her elitist noble family members, bitterly remembering how she spent her entire past life sacrificing her own happiness and working herself to the bone just to please people who never cared about her. Classic toxic Manhwa family. Whew, no wonder our girl just wants a quiet civil servant job. Flashback to child Namiya's warm childhood memories, where her loving father with shimmering silver hair gently pats her head as she beams with absolute joy, clutching a pink book tightly. Back in the present, Namiya slowly walks down the quiet palace hallway, completely unaware of the sharp gaze of a man watching her from behind. Suddenly, a firm hand reaches out and roughly grabs her wrist. Pull, completely halting her footsteps in the empty corridor. She spins around to find her twin brother Juan gritting his teeth in anger, shouting her name in pure frustration. Let me guess, he is the typical useless sibling who loves to leech off our main character's hard work. Classic toxic Manhwa family drama at its finest. Juan looks absolutely furious, his eyes flashing with irritation as he glares down at his sister. Juan angrily demands to know why she hasn't come home for 2 days, prompting Namiya to squeeze her eyes shut as she tries to wrench her wrist free. Twist! Looking at his angry face, Namiya bitterly thinks about her twin brother on paper, Juan, who has always been her absolute biggest headache. Juan dramatically clutches his chest, screaming in outrage that she shouldn't dare speak to her one and only big brother like that. Oh, so he's not just a parasite, he's also a drama queen. Someone get this man an Oscar for his terrible sibling performance. Sigh, sigh, letting out a tired sigh. Namiya knows for a fact that he didn't come all this way out of actual worry for her well-being. He nervously sweat drops, stammering that he has urgent paperwork that must be submitted by tomorrow anyway. She recalls how Juan has constantly dumped all his academic workloads onto her shoulders, slacking off while she earned him perfect grades. While Namiya stayed up all night writing essays, scribble scribble, Juan would just lounge lazily on his luxurious bed eating sweet apples. Seriously, she was basically running a full-time tutoring service for this parasite. No wonder she wants a quiet civil servant job far away from her family. Back in the present, Juan happily shoves his heavy clipboard into her hands, pleading with her to finish it quickly. He leans in dangerously close, whisper, whisper, creepily reminding her that if he gets into trouble, she will be in trouble too, leaving her feeling utterly pathetic. Clutching the clipboard tight, tremble, tremble, Namiya grits her teeth and accepts the task, knowing she has absolutely no other choice right now. Juan waves her off carelessly, telling her to return home immediately because their parents are also searching for her. My toxic family alarm is ringing louder than a fire siren. What kind of fresh disaster are her parents cooking up now? Namiya remembers how her greedy father, Baron Loapi, has been desperately borrowing money from every shady corner of the city. Squeezing her chin in deep thought, Namiya connects the dots, wondering if his massive debts are the real reason her family has been hounding her. Rub, rub. Clutching her forehead in appetizing pain, she feels a massive headache coming on from all this suffocating family stress. She bitterly visualizes her greedy family holding bags of cash, realizing they have been running the exact same manipulative script on her for 7 long years. Give me money if you want to know about your father. That is literally the most generic villain extortion line ever. They aren't even trying to hide their greed. Squeezing her eyes shut, Namiya desperately tells herself to just hold on a little bit longer until she can finally escape. A quiet screen appears, transporting us back to 15 years ago. The scene shifts to a beautiful harbor town, bathed in the soft, warm, golden glow of the setting sun. A young, cute chibi Namiya happily walks down the cobblestone street holding her foster father's hand, though she notes her mother vanished with massive debts before she could even remember her. Wow, the artist's lighting in this flashback is so incredibly cozy. It feels like stepping right into a warm watercolor fairy tale illustration. Little Namiya looks up with wide, innocent blue eyes. She recalls watching a wealthy mother affectionately patting her daughter's cheek as they walk through the market. Looking back at them, young Namiya admits that she sometimes couldn't help but feel a little envious of children who had mothers, even though their daily meals were incredibly simple, consisting of just some bacon, eggs, and potatoes. Honestly, that plate of breakfast actually looks delicious. Simple rustic food always hits different in these emotional flashbacks. She fondly remembers closing her eyes to pray before enjoying a peaceful, loving meal with her silver-haired father. But one quiet evening, inside their cozy, brightly lit cottage, young Namiya's tiny hand hesitantly reaches out for a warm, glowing candle. Stunned by her sudden question, her silver-haired father abruptly stands up in her dark bedroom, asking her what she is talking about. Oh no, she is about to drop a massive emotional truth bomb on him. Protect this precious father-daughter relationship at all costs. Lying quietly in her cozy bed, little Namiya looks up and reminds him that he is just a humble ethics teacher at a rural school. Her father's hand twitches, grasp against the green blanket as he listens to his daughter's painfully mature words. Sob. With tears welling up in her large eyes, young Namiya apologizes for making his life so difficult, wishing he could have lived easier without her. Heartbroken by her words, the father gently covers her mouth, slide, strictly telling her to never speak such sad things. Stop. My heart is literally melting. This father is so incredibly sweet, he deserves the entire world. Surrounded by a beautiful halo of blooming white roses, young Namiya stares back at him with pure, sparkling eyes. Trying to change the subject, her father warmly asks if anything fun happened at the library today. Young Namiya thinks for a moment before cheerfully admitting that she actually succeeded in making a magical scroll. Rustle. Little Namiya sits up and begins rummaging through her desk drawers while her father looks on in complete disbelief. Wait, a child making a functional magic scroll just from reading library books? Our girl was a literal magical prodigy from day one. Her father internally chuckles, thinking there is no way a child could make a proper scroll, but prepares to praise her anyway to boost her confidence. Suddenly, a brilliant, blinding blue light erupts right before his eyes. Young Namiya happily holds up a magnificent, swirling miniature galaxy of glowing blue stars and nebulae in her hands. eager to show him the stars he loves. Her face lights up with the most radiant, pure smile, surrounded by beautiful blue forget-me-not flowers. Look at that smile! The artistic detail in this magic awakening scene is absolutely top tier. A dark blue screen warns us that this incredible magical talent was actually the true beginning of her misfortune.
Back inside the quiet cottage, the father asks in absolute shock if she really made it herself.
On his knees, he gapes in sheer awe at the rotating magical solar system hovering in her tiny hands. Young Namiya proudly explains that she simply used basic constellation and scroll theory books from the library as her references. Oh, I just read a couple of books. She is literally the magical equivalent of a kid building a nuclear reactor in their garage. Her father looks down at her with intense dread, wondering how she could possibly possess such terrifying magical power without any lineage. Trouble. Fearing she did something wrong, young Namiya shrinks back and tearfully asks if she has disappointed him, leaving her father completely frozen in shock. Let's pick up right where we left off in this emotional flashback. Little Namiya's tiny shoulders are gripped tightly as her silver-haired father desperately shouts her name. He's panicking big time, his eyes wide as he looks down at her. He desperately tries to shake her out of her mature, self-sacrificing thoughts, screaming that her assumptions are completely wrong. He takes a deep breath, trying to calm his racing heart. Surrounded by the warm, glowing halo of beautiful golden lilies, he gently whispers to his precious daughter. He admits that he isn't burdened by her at all. In fact, he is just so incredibly proud of her and thinks she is absolutely amazing. The atmosphere shifts to pure warmth as her father tenderly cups her face in his hands, pressing his forehead against hers. He gives her the most loving, soft smile, and she blushes warmly under his gentle pat-pat. Oh my goodness, this is easily one of the most wholesome parent-child moments in manhwa history. My heart is officially a puddle of mush right now. Bashful and slightly embarrassed by his own sudden emotional outburst, the sweet silver-haired father lets out a soft chuckle while looking away. Little Namiya can only giggle in response, feeling the immense weight of his unconditional love wrapping around her like a cozy blanket. Scene transitions to a cute chibi-styled blue background covered in adorable bouncing bunnies. Little Namiya cheerfully pipes up, announcing that she didn't just make a cool magical scroll today, she actually used it to help someone in need. Her father looks on with a sweat drop, curiously asking her who exactly she helped. Clasping a heavy library book close to her chest, little Namiya recalls walking through the quiet back garden near the public archives. Through the window, she spots two mysterious silhouettes, a young boy and a taller man cloaked in dark, heavy capes, looking highly suspicious as they sneak around. In her father's hyperactive imagination, he instantly visualizes a dramatic life-or-death crisis. He pictures young Namiya heroically leaping in front of a deadly blade to shield the mysterious boy, completely ignoring his own safety. He clutches his head, letting out a dramatic scream that echoes through the room. Honestly, this dad's overprotective imagination is top-tier comedy. He literally visualizes his 8-year-old daughter as an action movie star. Sweating buckets in absolute terror, the frantic father frantically demands to know if she's hurt, shouting that she should have called for an adult first if there was danger. Chibi Namiya just stares at him with deadpan glowing blue eyes, bluntly pointing out that nobody else was around and she used her scroll perfectly. She sassily tells him to pick one. Is he going to worry about her or is he going to scold her? Recalling the incident, Chibi Namiya describes the mysterious, cloaked blonde boy with red eyes who promised to thank her later. Although she suspects he might be the wealthy son of a local count, she notes that he looked incredibly suspicious wearing a mask. When her dad freaks out asking if she dared to follow him, she folds her arms and tells him to stop treating her like a little kid. Her father lets out a massive sigh of relief, placing his hand over his chest as he absorbs her explanation. Even though he's relieved she didn't follow the suspicious cloaked boy, he still keeps a wary, sweat-dropping expression, thinking the whole situation smells highly fishy. But little Namiya is a practical realist through and through. She taps her chin, tap, thoughtfully, casually musing that if the boy really was rich, maybe she should have followed him after all. She hilariously wonders if she could have asked the Count to marry her off to his rich family, completely bypassing all their financial struggles. This completely breaks her poor father's brain. Lightning literally strikes in the background as he clutches his chest in sheer, unadulterated horror, shouting in protest.
Meanwhile, Namiya innocently taps her lip, wondering out loud if she should go back and search for the wealthy boy tomorrow. Surrounded by stunning, glowing blue forget-me-nots, young Namiya points her finger in the air, confidently explaining her brilliant plan. She points out that marrying into a rich family would easily pay off all their massive debts. Seriously, she is barely a child and she's already trying to secure a bag to save her family. Give this girl a business school scholarship already. Before she can finish her sentence, her father lunges forward and sweeps her up into a sudden hug, cutting her off entirely. He squeezes her tiny body tightly against his chest, completely overwhelmed by how much his precious daughter is worrying about their heavy financial burdens. Tears stream down the father's face as he holds her close, crying out of absolute guilt and regret. He apologizes profusely, sobbing that he should have never let his smart, beautiful daughter carry such heavy worries at her young age. Namiya sweat drops, frantically telling him to calm down. Determined to be a reliable father, he pumps his fist in the air with fiery resolve, declaring that he will absolutely figure out a solution to their money problems. Little Namiya can only stare at him with a giant sweat drop running down her head, highly doubting his ability to solve their financial ruin. To reassure her, her father reaches out his hand, and they lock their pinky fingers together in a tight pinky promise hook. This silent promise of a better future shines brightly under a golden, sparkling light, sealing their deep bond. The flashback shifts to a grand, lavishly decorated parlor. Her father sits across a massive, polished table, leaving young Namiya in the custody of his brother, Baron Alexander Lawapi. While her father begs him to take care of her and get her into the prestigious academy, Alexander just lazily scratches his ear, giving a careless, insincere response. Sitting quietly on her oversized chair, young Namiya looks down sadly. Her father reluctantly slides a thick paper envelope filled with his hard-earned savings across the polished table, paying his greedy brother to ensure Namiya's safety and education. Alexander's eyes instantly light up with greed as he peers inside the envelope, counting the fat stack of cash. He snidely remarks on how his brother managed to gather so much money after all this time, while her father internally sweat drops, warning his brother that if he acts suspicious, he won't hesitate to take Namiya back. Sensing the highly tense, uncomfortable atmosphere in the room, young Namiya anxiously squeezes her floral skirt. Her tiny hands tremble as she listens to the adults negotiate her future like she's some sort of business transaction. After the deal is finalized, her father kneels down in front of her by the doorway, gently cupping her chin. He looks at her with deep sorrow, softly telling her to stay healthy and promising her that her uncle will take good care of her while he's away. Young Namiya looks up at him with wide, tearful blue eyes. Her cheeks are flushed red with sadness, and she clutches her dress tightly, sensing that this farewell is far more permanent than her father is letting on. Shadows fall over her father's face as he turns his head away, unable to look his precious daughter in the eyes. With a shaking, soft voice, she asks him exactly where he is going, but she is met with only heavy, suffocating silence. Her father slowly turns back to face her, giving her a quiet, incredibly sad smile framed by blooming blue forget-me-nots. Namiya bitterly notes that his expression was so devastatingly sorrowful that she couldn't bring herself to ask him anything else, knowing it would only hurt him more. Instantly trying to lighten the heavy mood, her father vigorously shake his head in a playful chibi style. He assures her with a bright smile that it's absolutely nothing to worry about, trying his best to put her anxious mind at ease. Forcing herself to be brave, young Namiya forces a bright, tearful smile, her eyes sparkling with unshed tears amidst the blooming blue flowers. Oh, this is absolutely heartbreaking. She's smiling so hard just to make sure her father doesn't leave with a heavy heart. Waving his hand with a gentle smile, her silver-haired father turns around and walks out the door, carrying a simple rucksack on his shoulder. He promises her that he will definitely be back, completely unaware that this would be the last time they would ever see each other. Back in the present, adult Namiya stands outside a massive, ornate wooden door. She lets out a heavy puff, stealing her resolve. She tells herself to just finish this annoying family task as quickly as possible and get out of there. Lifting her hand, she knocks on the door. Knock, knock. Inside the lavishly decorated room, her greedy Uncle Alexander and Aunt Peneloa gasp in surprise, their faces instantly twisting into nervous. The heavy double doors swing open and Namiya step into the room, looking absolutely stunning and regal in her dark blue gown. Blue roses bloom around her like a protective shield as her uncle loudly welcomes her with a sleazy grin. Baron Alexander and Baroness Penelos put on a sickeningly sweet display of fake affection, giggling snicker as they warmly invite her to take a seat. Oh look, the toxic dynamic duo
duo is putting on their best fake-friendly performance. I smell a massive financial scam brewing. Namia sits down on the plush sofa with absolute grace, her expression cold and unbothered. She gets straight to the point, coolly stating that she heard rumors about them borrowing massive sums of money in her name to fund their failed investments, which clearly went horribly wrong.
Furious at her bluntness, Alexander instantly jumps up from his seat, slamming his fist in outrage. He screams that she has absolutely no manners or sense of propriety as a noble, but Namia coolly fires back that borrowing money in her name is far more disgraceful.
Sweat dripping down his face, the uncle nervously stammers that his investment information was 100 solid. Namia just stares at him with dead, judgmental eyes, dryly noting that if he can't even name his source, it obviously came from a shady, untrustworthy place. Lost for words and thoroughly humiliated, the uncle slams both hands onto the table in a violent outburst of rage. He screams at her to shut up, unable to handle being read like an open book by his own niece. He points an angry finger right at her face, shamelessly shouting that nobody could have predicted the investment would fail. Namia internally sighs, utterly baffled by how a grown man can be so confidently shameless and pathetic. He dramatically clutches his chest, shouting that he didn't do this for himself, but for the good of the entire family. Namia looks on with a completely deadpan expression, bitterly thinking to herself that it's funny how they never seem to include her in that definition of family. Her beautiful blue eyes narrow as she listens to him ramble about how they would all be living like royalty if the investment had worked out. Feeling a massive headache coming on, Namia decides she can't stand being in the same room as these brain-dead parasites for another second. She stands up, her silk dress giving a soft rustle as she coolly turns her back on them. She states that if they have nothing else of substance to say, she will be taking her leave, prompting her panicked uncle to desperately call out her name. Stopping in her tracks, Namia glances back over her shoulder, her expression filled with icy curiosity as she waits to hear what kind of desperate nonsense they are going to pitch next. The uncle rustle through his pockets and pulls out a small portrait. He eagerly announces that the eldest son of the incredibly wealthy Olton Merchant Guild has taken a massive liking to her, while Namia glares back, completely unimpressed. He slide the portrait across the table, calling the man a real catch despite him being a bit older. Namia stares down at the picture of an incredibly greasy, overweight, middle-aged man, dryly pointing out that he looks at least 20 years older than her. A real catch? He looks like a cartoon villain who steals candy from babies. This family's audacity is truly unmatched. Reading through the details, Namia looks disgusted, noting that this man expects her to completely quit her job once they get married. She firmly states that she wants to keep working, warning her aunt and uncle to never go around spreading rumors that she likes him. Her aunt waves her hand dismissively, flutter, putting on a fake, patronizing smile. She tells Namia she's being far too negative, claiming she will grow to like him, and excitedly adds that the man hasn't dated anyone since his divorce 14 years ago. Namia narrows her eyes, dropping a massive truth bomb. She brings up the public records, coldly reminding her aunt that his divorce 14 years ago was literally caused by extreme domestic violence. She mockingly suggests that only old, desperate folks would ever call a wife-beater a real catch. Her aunt's face twists into a furious, vein-popping rage twitch, shouting that Namia will never find a better financial deal than this. Namia just sweat drops, coolly firing back that if the deal's so amazing, her aunt should just go ahead and marry the guy herself. Oh snap! Burn of the century! Our girl does not hold back. Turning on her heel, Namia steps toward the exit. She firmly declines their disgusting proposal, bluntly reminding them that they are the greedy fools who racked up all this massive debt in the first place, so it's their problem to solve. Reaching out her hand, she grabs the metal door handle, turning it with a loud click as she prepares to walk out of this toxic mansion once and for all. Just as she is about to open the door, her uncle drops a massive bombshell. He asks her in a low, sinister voice if she isn't even a little bit curious about where her father actually went, causing Namia to freeze in absolute shock. The greedy Uncle Alexander puts on a sickeningly smug grin, basically trying to blackmail her with the one thing she cares about. He tells her that if she just agrees to marry that old wife-beater, he will spill all the secrets about her father's disappearance right now. It's a total trap, visualized by a frayed rope about to snap. He talks about marrying into a wealthy family to change her fate, claiming that with their money, she can finally track down her father like she always wanted. Seeing her stay silent, the uncle mistakenly thinks he has won. He gasps excitedly, jumping to conclusions as he cheers that she has finally made up her mind. He laughs and boasts that when it comes to anything regarding her father, there is absolutely no way she could ever refuse. He's already mentally celebrating, thinking their family's massive debt is finally as good as gone. But Namia looks at him with a completely blank, unbothered expression, utterly shattered flattering his delusions. With a calm, clear voice, she bluntly announces that she is officially leaving this house. The uncle's face instantly drops into a state of sheer, mindless panic as he lets out a pathetic, "Huh?" while sweat drips down his face, drip, drip. He stutters in complete disbelief, asking what on earth she is talking about. Namiya just sighs, coolly explaining that she has thought it over and realized there is absolutely no reason to keep living a miserable life in this toxic household. Oh, look at his tiny brain trying to process the fact that his golden goose just flew away. His shocked face is literally the definition of a cartoon character getting smacked with a frying pan. Why should she stay when she has already found a brand new lifeline? A massive, incredibly reliable, and handsome one. We see a hilariously cute Chibi Namiya climb onto a gigantic rope, which leads straight to the handsome, blonde-crowned prince in his dashing military uniform. Talk about an absolute upgrade from a greasy, abusive merchant. Stepping toward the exit, Namiya doesn't waste another second looking at her parasitic relatives. She turns her back on them, declaring that she has absolutely no more business in this absolute hellhole, as the heavy wooden doors swing open with a slow creak-creak. Looking radiant under a shower of sparkling golden lights and beautiful white roses, Namiya throws them a gorgeous, mocking smile. She cheerfully adds that, for starters, she is actually a huge fan of good looks, so she's switching the bank account where her salary goes from now on. Talk about cutting off their financial oxygen completely. Upon hearing that they won't get a single penny of her salary anymore, the uncle's soul literally leaves his body as he expels a white ghost puff. His wife screams in absolute horror, grabbing his shoulder as he collapses into a state of vegetative shock. Honestly, the artist deserves an award for this. Watching this greedy leech throw up his own soul is the most satisfying thing I've seen all day. The scene shifts to a dimly lit blue-hued room where a grim discovery has just been made. A man is slumped lifelessly against the wall, covered in dark crimson blood, as heavy footsteps step approach. The blonde-crowned Prince Kiaros stands in the doorway, narrowing his eyes as his assistant Chase panics that they are a step too late. The prince steps closer to the corpse, grimly noting that it seems someone else beat him to the punch. The dead man sits in a pool of his own blood, which is splattered all over his shirt, indicating a sudden and violent end. The dead man is holding a small, mysterious brown bottle tightly in his pale hand. Kiaros identifies him, noting that this man's name is Lenin, a key figure they desperately needed to question. Standing over the body, Chase explains that Lenin was currently an employee of the Ministry of Justice. Wait, a justice official ending up dead in a suspicious room with a mysterious potion? This plot is thickening faster than instant ramen left on the stove. I bet my left shoe there is a massive government conspiracy at play here. Bending down, the prince carefully slides the small brown bottle out of the dead man's stiff fingers. Chase continues detailing Lenin's background, mentioning that 10 years ago, he suddenly transferred departments, citing maladjustment. Holding the bottle up to the light, Kiaros listens as Chase mentions that Lenin was originally part of the scroll management department. Kiaros' eyes narrow as he repeats the name of the department in his mind, realizing that yet again, all paths seem to lead back to that exact place. Suddenly, Chase spots something of interest on the nearby desk. He gasps as his eyes land on a folded piece of paper lying quietly on the table. Chase picks up the document, his cloak rustling rustle as he unfolds it. He slowly reads through the contents, murmuring that it appears to be a suicide note left behind by the deceased Lenin. The camera zooms in on the paper, revealing strange, ancient-looking glyphs written in purple ink. It looks highly suspicious, almost as if it was written under some sort of magical duress or forged to look like a suicide note to cover up a murder. Kiaros doesn't even bother looking at the paper, coldly telling Chase not to read that garbage because it will only make him feel bad. Chase is completely startled, letting out a confused yes as his face twists in surprise. Wait, does Kiaros already know the note is a complete fake meant to throw him off the scent? The prince is playing 3D chess while everyone else is playing checkers. Against a cute backdrop of sweating chibi dogs, Chase internally laments how pathetic it is for an imperial civil servant to gamble himself into such massive debt that he'd end his own life. He calls it utterly pathetic, though he sweat drop, as he gently suggests to the prince that he doesn't have to be quite so harsh about the dead. Turning on his heel, the prince instructs Chase to stay behind and wait for the night order, ordering them to collect every single document and item in the room without fail. Chase frantically calls out to him as Kiaros strides toward the door with loud footsteps, clack, clack. Pulling his dark hood over his face with a soft rustle, the prince looks back with an icy, determined gaze framed by vivid blue flowers. He coolly states that he is going to the only place that matters, back to work to hunt down the true mastermind. With a loud slam, Kairos exits the room, leaving a panicked and terrified Chase standing completely alone in the dark chamber with the fresh corpse. A funny screen text displays Chase's internal screams, crying out in desperate plea for the prince not to leave him alone in the spooky room. Oh, poor Chase. He's supposed to be a top-tier Imperial Knight, but he's absolutely terrified of being left with a ghost. I swear, the comedic timing in this series is top-notch. Meanwhile, the scene cuts back to Namiya, who is currently stuffing her face munch with a massive warm steamed bun, her cheeks puffed up like an adorable little squirrel. Sitting on a public park bench next to a tower of steaming buns, Chibi Namiya chews thoughtfully while sweating. She internally notes that she stormed out of her uncle's house in a massive huff, but now she has absolutely no idea what she is supposed to do next, while random pedestrians stare at her in complete bewilderment. Swallowing her food, Namiya pulls out some real estate listing papers, holding them up with a soft rustle as she realizes that her very first priority is to find a decent place to live. Looking at the listings, she is met with two absolutely ridiculous extreme options. The first is an ultra-luxury standalone mansion that rivals the Imperial Palace for a whopping $1.5 billion, while the only cheap option is a literal haunted house for $500,000. Namiya's sweat drops in sheer disbelief, crying out why there are only extreme options, realizing that all the normal good houses are already completely gone. Sitting in a depressed chibi pose, Namiya lets out a tired sigh, puff, thinking that she has officially learned something new about the harsh realities of trying to live alone. Wow, even in a magical fantasy manhwa, the housing market is an absolute nightmare. Whew, I guess some struggles are truly universal, no matter what universe you're in. Scene cuts to a messy-haired guy with round glasses who is screaming in absolute refusal, his face turning bright red with outrage. He aggressively crosses his arms, shouting that she is absolutely not staying at his place, especially since he doesn't even have any spare rooms. Namiya just stares at him with dead, unbothered eyes, dryly muttering under her breath that he is being incredibly stingy. The guy waves his hands frantically back and forth, shake, yelling that he doesn't want to be called stingy over housing issues, and points out how ridiculous it is for literal rivals to live under the same roof. Namiya just tilts her head, blankly asking if that is really the only problem he has. Against a cute bunny background, Namiya's inner thoughts highlight the funniest part of this interaction. This guy doesn't even care about the fact that she is a woman. He's so laser-focused on their petty professional rivalry that he completely skipped the whole cohabitation romance trope entirely. That is peak academic rival energy right there. Namiya points a sharp finger right at his nose, asking him with a dramatic flair if it really doesn't matter to him if his greatest rival literally dies homeless on the streets. The guy flinches back in panic as she corners him with her words. Putting on a spectacular Oscar-worthy acting performance, Namiya clasps her hands over her chest as beautiful golden sparkles and flowers bloom around her. She softly whispers with a trembling, dramatic voice that if she dies like this, he will fall into deep despair because he'll never get the chance to officially beat her in their rivalry. She continues teasing him, spinning his mind into a frenzy by warning him that he will remain second best forever, regretting his stinginess even as an old man. Thoroughly baited and panicked, the guy screams that she shouldn't move a single muscle, running off in a flurry to find her a decent house himself, while Namiya sticks her tongue out with a playful blah, noting how incredibly easy he was to manipulate. Standing in the corridor with her suitcase, Namiya thinks to herself that while the housing situation is temporarily solved, there is another major event that is supposed to happen around this exact time. Back in his imperial study, Kiro sits back in his grand chair, tapping tap the mysterious poison bottle. He thinks to himself that he feels constantly one step behind, and the more he traces the mastermind, the more all the evidence points to a single, highly suspicious location. Oh, the dark atmosphere is back, and the prince is looking incredibly handsome and dangerous. I love how the story seamlessly balances hilarious comedy with intense mystery. A grand royal emblem of the scroll management department glows brightly against a dark purple background. Kiaros's thoughts confirm that among all the suspects in that department, the most glaringly suspicious one is none other than Namiya Luwapi. Kiaros recalls Namia's highly detailed and confident explanation of the assassin attack during her interrogation. He thinks about how she spoke about the assassins not giving up after one failure, and how monitoring the inside collaborator was their best chance to capture them. His eyes narrow into a sharp glare as he clutches the poison bottle with a tight grip. Squeeze, squeeze! He questions how a mere low-ranking civil servant who shouldn't know anything could speak with such absolute conviction, unless she already knew exactly what was going to happen beforehand. Bringing the bottle up to his nose, Kiara sniffs, sniff, sniff, noting a slightly sour smell. He thinks about how his poison resistance was built up through brutal training since childhood, allowing him to identify almost any toxin by scent, but this specific sour smell is a complete first for him. Childhood poison training? That sounds incredibly tragic and intense. No wonder our prince is so cold and calculating. But as the purple fumes swirl out of the bottle, Kiros's eyes suddenly widen in absolute shock. A sudden memory flashes in his mind as he realizes that he was wrong. He actually has smelled this exact scent once before in his past. The memory shifts to a flashback of a grand sunlit training field outside a massive palace building. A heavy clack-clack echoes through the air. A young, child version of Keros is sitting flat on his back on the grass, looking up in exhaustion. Standing over him is a towering, muscular knight holding a wooden training sword, looking down at the defeated young prince. The escort knight smirks with a cheeky, confident grin, boasting that with this latest victory, he has officially won 86 out of 86 matches against the prince. 86-0? Talk about a total wipeout. This knight has absolutely no chill when it comes to training a child. The knight casually tosses wooden blade in the air, laughing as he asks if his highness is tired already. A decorative title plate reveals this boisterous man to be Kiros's escort knight, Prawn. Panting heavily, young Kairos wipes his face, staring up at Prawn with wide, sweat-slicked red eyes, weakly asking the knight if he is truly just a normal human to possess such insane strength. Chuckling warmly, Prawn reaches out his hand, pull the young prince up from the grass as he playfully fires back, asking if his highness is truly a legendary dragonkin with how easily he gets exhausted. Dusting off his pants with a soft pat-pat, the 10-year-old prince grumbles that he is currently in his dark period of growth, trying his best to defend his bruised royal pride despite his young age. Young Kairos points out that Prawn is famous even within the elite knight order for possessing monstrous superhuman strength. Prawn just points a goofy finger at his own chin, letting out a silly chuckle as he acts surprised that he's so famous. Prawn seems like such a fun, wholesome mentor. I really hope nothing bad happened to him in the future, given the prince's dark memories. With a booming laugh, Prawn enthusiastically slaps the young prince's back, slap, slap, completely ignoring her own monstrous strength. She boisterously yells out that she appreciates the compliment, confidently telling Kiaros that if he eats well and keeps practicing his swings, he can eventually grow up to be just like her. Poor Kiaros is left wheezing as her heavy hand nearly caves a small ribcage in. Meanwhile, a brown-haired man in a vest slowly approaches them from behind, looking incredibly sweat-slicked and distressed at the sheer abuse the little prince is enduring. Clutching his head in complete panic, the new arrival screams out at the top of his lungs, demanding to know what on earth Prawn thinks she is doing to his highness. A fancy gold-bordered title plate introduces this highly stressed gentleman as Will, Kiaros' dedicated escort knight. Honestly, you have to feel bad for Will here. While Prawn is out here acting like a chaotic older sibling, Will is the only one actually remembering that they are guarding a royal heir, not a sack of potatoes. Lowering his hands with a heavy sigh, Will desperately pleads with Prawn, telling her that even if she is the legendary powerhouse of the guard, she absolutely cannot handle his highness's body so carelessly. But before Prawn can even respond, young Kiaros calmly cuts in with a flat voice, telling Will that it's perfectly fine. Will freezes mid-sentence, blankly blinking blink blink as he lets out a confused squeak, completely taken aback by the young prince's defense of his rough mentor. Staring right back at Will with his intense crimson eyes, Kiaros explains that his imperial father also favors Prawn a great deal, so there is absolutely no need to worry. Beside him, Prawn crosses her arms and looks away with a slight pout, completely unbothered by Will's frantic lecture. The contrast between these characters is just gold. We have the overprotective mother hen knight, the giant chaotic sibling knight, and the tiny 10-year-old prince who has more composure than both of them combined. Brushing off the lecture, young Kiaros reaches out and gently grabs Prawn's wrist, calmly suggesting that they head over to the shade to cool off after their intense sparring match.
Will is left standing there completely dumbfounded, frantically waving his hand as he cries out for the prince to wait. It is clear that no matter how much Will tries to enforce royal protocol, the little prince is already completely wrapped around Prawn's finger. Hand in hand, the tiny golden-haired prince and his towering muscular escort walk toward the lush sunlit garden as the golden afternoon light washes over them. It's an incredibly heartwarming sight, showing a rare, tender side of Keros that we've never seen in the present timeline. The soft rustle of the trees creates a peaceful, idyllic atmosphere, making it feel like a completely different world from the dark, cold imperial palace. Under the deep, cooling shade of a massive ancient tree, the two sit together in the grass. A soft narration box reveals a poignant truth. Perhaps because the young prince lost his mother at such a tender age, he became exceptionally attached to Prawn, who was actually a female escort knight. Gasp! Wait, Prawn is a woman? I am absolutely floored. The artist drew her so incredibly buff and masculine that I completely fell for the trick. This is hands down the best character design twist I've seen in a while. Prawn happily holds something out, shouting for the prince to take a look. With a cheerful singing voice, Prawn suddenly shoves a massive squirming furry green caterpillar right into Kiros' face. Young Keros freezes entirely, his crimson eyes widening in absolute horror as a single cold sweat drop rolls down his cheek. Oh my god, of all the things to show a young prince, Prawn really has zero boundaries when it comes to playing around, and poor Keros' lifelong trauma of bugs might have just started right here. Watching the chaotic duo from a safe distance, Will stands with tears streaming down his face, sob, noting how nice it is that they are being so friendly, even if he is being left completely out in the cold. Prawn proudly laughs out loud, asking the prince if he doesn't think the bug is adorable. Poor Will. He is officially the third wheel of this nightly companionship, relegated to watching his master bond over giant garden pests from the sidelines. The peaceful, golden memories of the sunny training field suddenly shift to a grand, solemn indoor setting. High stained glass windows cast a warm orange glow across a massive, towering room filled with endless rows of bookshelves. A large banner with a golden bird emblem hangs proudly from the ceiling, and a wooden sign marks this impressive, quiet sanctuary as the Arvin Great Library. Wearing a dark, hooded cloak to blend in, young Kiaro stands by a bookshelf, carefully flipping through a massive tome. Behind him, Prawn is slouched lazily in a grand chair, groan as she whines to the prince about why on earth they had to come to such a boring, stuffy place. Kiaros doesn't even look back, coolly stating that they are here to read up on Southern swordsmanship manuals. Prawn lets out a dramatic pout, grumbling under her breath that a dummy like her has absolutely nothing to do in a quiet place like this. But Kiaros gently reminds her that if he ever wants to officially beat her in a match, he needs to study the proper theory as well. He then firmly tells her that she must keep her voice down in the library, making Prawn puff out her cheeks in silent, childish frustration. Realizing that his giant bodyguard is about to die of absolute boredom, Kiaros lets out a small sigh. With a soft pat-pat, he gently closes the heavy leather-bound manual, deciding that it's finally time to put the books away and give her what she actually wants. You can really see how much Kiaros cared for Prawn's happiness, always putting his own academic interests aside just to keep her entertained. Heading back out into the dense orange-lit autumn forest, the two stand opposite each other, raising their wooden practice blades with confident grins. Kairos proudly notes that, as expected, practical application is always the best way to master swordsmanship. Prawn happily raises her wooden sword, eager to teach the young prince another valuable lesson in combat. But right as they are about to clash, Prawn's golden eyes suddenly widen in absolute shock gasp. Her instinctual combat senses flare up as she detects a sudden life-threatening danger lurking in the shadows behind the young prince. The atmospheric tension instantly spikes as the serene forest breeze turns icy and menacing. With a desperate scream, Prawn drops all pleasantries and lunges forward with terrifying speed, her hands stretching out desperately towards the young prince. Kiaros freezes in confusion, completely unable to react as his mentor's face contorts into pure, unadulterated panic. With a swift swoop, Prawn throws her entire body over the young prince, shielding his small frame with her own back. Just a split second later, a razor-sharp, poison-coated blade slashes through the air, slash, narrowly missing Kiaros' head, but slicing deeply into Prawn's shoulder. Painful groan escapes Prawn's lips as her body stumbles back, stumble. Kiaros' eyes stretch wide in absolute horror as he screams out her name, realizing that his beloved bodyguard has just taken a severe, life-threatening hit to protect him from an unseen assassin. Clutching her heavily bleeding shoulder, Prawn grits her teeth through the intense agony, desperately begging the young prince to run away and escape immediately. But before they can even make a move, a loud snap echoes through the forest as a giant decaying green leg stomps heavily onto the grass with a loud thud,
surrounded by a thick, suffocating cloud of dark purple poison magic. Young Kiros looks up in pure, paralyzing terror as the dark purple smoke clears, revealing a grotesque, green-skinned goblin-like creature crouching right in front of him. The beast's yellow eyes glow with a demonic light as it drools, clutching a dagger coated in dripping green venom. Kiaros's mind races in complete panic, internally screaming that this is a Goblin, a highly dangerous monster that should absolutely never appear in a peaceful village like Arvin. Staring directly into the horrific beast's glowing yellow eyes, Kiros's crimson pupils tremble in absolute disbelief. The realization that a wild, toxic Goblin is hunting them in broad daylight makes his blood run cold, confirming that this is no random wild animal attack. Someone deliberately unleashed this venomous monster to assassinate him. Approaching low with its blade dripping with the exact sour-smelling green poison, the Goblin lets out a low, menacing hiss. This is incredibly intense. So this is where Kiaros first encountered that mysterious sour-smelling poison. It wasn't an assassin's chemical concoction, but the natural venom of a summoned Goblin. This flashback is answering so many questions, and I cannot wait to see how young Kiaros and Pran survive this horrific trap.